first. I feel like she kind of sits so far on the end.
Good evening. This is Monday, March 6, 2023. We're here for a Leawood governing body meeting, and I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Mayor Dunn is present and presiding. Councilmember Azeltine.
Here.
Councilmember Sippel.
Here.
Councilmember Larson.
Here.
Councilmember Phila.
Here.
Councilmember Osmond.
Here.
Councilmember Rawlings.
Here.
Councilmember Harrison. Here. Councilmember Kane.
Here.
Thank you. We are all present this evening. The next item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, and we do have a scout with us this evening, maybe the first time since COVID, and we would like to welcome you to the podium to lead us in the pledge, if you would, and you may tell us your name and your scout rank, and we will rise.
This is Boston, and I'm Brian Preston. We're from Troop 396. Will you please follow me with the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do appreciate your assistance this evening. The next item is the approval of the agenda. And other than a few replacement pages for minor edits, I don't believe there are any modifications to the agenda this evening. So I would take a motion to approve, please.
Move to approve.
Motion from
Second.
Ms. Larson, second from Mr. Rawlings. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's approved unanimously. Thank you. Under citizen comments, we have 10 citizens that have signed in to speak, and they've all signed in on our one planning item, the East Village. So I will recognize you all when we get to that item in a few moments. Thank you. We have no proclamations this evening. We move now to presentations and recognitions. And Chief Colin Fitzgerald, our fire chief, has 4 introductions that he's going to make for us.
Good evening. Colin Fitzgerald, Fire Chief. As is our tradition, we like to come in front of you with our new personnel, just to introduce them to you and give you a chance to put some faces with some names. And we hired 4 new firefighters in January, and they all made it here tonight. So we have Joe Brazil, right? Brazil, that's how you say it, right? And he came to us. He's actually new to the fire service, kind of switched over from the business world, decided on a much better career, correct? Yeah, so we're actually his first department.
Good. Welcome.
Then we have Jordan Smith here. He comes to us from Edwardsville Fire Department. What, about a year and a half there, correct? Yeah?
Right.
And fun fact about him is he drives a Jurassic Park Jeep, so he gets a lot of fun about that. Next, we have Andrew Jones, and Andrew comes to us from, you were part-time at Tonganoxie and Bonner Springs, correct? So a couple years part-time with those 2 departments before he came to us. And last but not least is Nick Scott. Nick, West Peculiar Fire Protection District, about 4 years, correct? And he's actually a licensed paramedic, which we're always glad to get them right off the bat, because it saves us time on down the road. So these are our 4 new personnel.
Wonderful. Well, welcome to you all. Do any of you want to make any comments, or are you letting the chief just do it for you?
Yeah.
You're letting the chief.
They're a shy bunch.
Well, we're delighted to have you. We're glad that you realize that Leawood is the department you want to be in. So thank you so much. And you do have a wonderful reputation in the Leawood Fire Department. You probably have heard that. Our citizens love our fire department. So thank you very, very much. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
We have no special business this evening. We move now to consent agenda items 8 A through O. And I'll ask, is there anything anyone would like to pull for discussion? Well, if not, then a motion to approve.
Second.
A motion from Ms. Villa, second from Mr. Azeltine. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's approved unanimously. Thank you. Going to item 9, committee recommendations. This is from the January 10th Planning Commission meeting. Resolution approving a final plan and final plat for East Village, formerly Cameron's Court, Phase 1 and 2, located south of 133rd Street and east of Pawnee Lane. Case 85-22. This item was continued from the February 6, 2023 governing body meeting. And at that February 6th governing body meeting, there was a unanimous motion approved to refer this to our city administrator, who had been on the job for 6 days at the time, and Diane Stoddard. And she's with us on Zoom this evening. And she was to meet with the development group as well as some citizens. And I do want to thank Chuck Sipple and Lisa Harrison for choosing those citizens. I think we threw that as an additional part of the motion. So thank you for choosing the citizens who participated. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Stoddard so she can give a recap. And we do have lots and lots of material that we have had over the course of these 30 days. And I want to assure the residents that we have read all of the emails, and we appreciate you sending them, and thank you for your involvement. So, Ms. Stoddard.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. I do apologize for not being in the room with you this evening, but I did have a close personal contact with someone who did test positive for COVID, and I wanted to err on the side of being very careful about that. So I appreciate the opportunity to join on Zoom. I do want to start by thanking all of the representatives of the development team and also the HOA representatives that served on the group that met with the city staff team. And those representatives on the HOA team were Rob Groves from Greenbrier, Steve Dewar from Enclave, Jason Reef and Gareth Matthews from Wilshire Place, and Rachel Rubin from Waterford. And we also had the representatives of the developer, Rick Odo, Henry Clover, and Curtis Holland, who participated along with the city staff members, including myself, Mark Klein, David Lay, and Patty Bennett. We had several meetings that I'll recap for you. And just to let you know, for this evening, I thought I would go through the memo that's included in the packet and kind of walk you through that, as well as some additional documents that were provided to the governing body that are available at the dais. So this includes another staff memo that we provided, as well as an updated list of some possible stipulations related to this development item for your consideration this evening. So I'll be walking you through that in my comments. We held a series of 3 meetings total related to this topic since the last governing body meeting. We met individually, the city staff team with the developer team, and then also the city staff team with the HOA representatives on Valentine's Day on February 14th. And then again, we met as a group together a week ago. And so there's been a lot of activity, and I want to thank everybody again for all of their time. And I think that all the parties that were involved worked really hard on moving toward a compromise here. And I think you'll see that reflected in a number of the issues that we go through here this evening. So at this point, I'd just like to share my screen, and I'll be reviewing for you some of the detail that is in the packet memo. And I thought it might just be easier to scroll through these items and talk through them so that everyone's on the same page with what we're referring to. So I'm looking at a document here that was provided in the packet that was a staff memo. And this is the section that worked to summarize the major issues that came up during the discussion. And there were really, I would characterize, three major issues: traffic calming, berms, and then the issue of pitched roofs and architectural detail. And then there was a couple of others that I'll also highlight. So beginning with the issue on traffic calming, essentially with this, the HOA representatives and the developers worked on a solution together, which they were jointly proposing, whereby the city and the developer would pay for traffic calming, splitting costs 50-50 up to a cap of $200,000, with no financial participation from the petitioners through a benefit district. The maximum developer obligation with this proposal would be capped at $100,000. So under this proposal, if the cost for traffic calming ended up being less than $200,000, the cost would be split 50-50 between the developers. So an example might be if the costs were $120,000, that would be split $60,000 on the developer side and $60,000 from the city. There's a couple of comments that I included in the staff memo for your review that I wanted to highlight. That is that, as you know, the city does have a traffic calming policy, which we included in your packet. And this generally requires traffic calming costs to be funded by special benefit districts. So in participation from the properties that are directly benefiting. And while the governing body could choose to change or deviate from this adopted policy, in this case, there are implications for future areas that may want to request traffic calming. And then I think it's important to note that currently the city has one special benefit district that had been created under this policy to fund traffic calming. And in that case, the costs were funded by the benefiting properties. I think it's important to note that as these discussion has focused a bit on traffic calming, it's a little challenging to have a discussion at this point relating to the overall cost split when the costs are not fully known. As you're aware, there has been a work by the Public Works Committee related to the traffic calming issue. And currently, there's a process of a survey that is going to the residents, as well as various data that's being collected. And it will be in the future that a plan is developed and that the costs would be known so that we would know if exactly what figure might be discussed. So given this, I would really suggest that we have a future discussion related to how traffic calming costs would be split between any party that would be over what the developer has indicated to us that they would be willing to fund, which is the $100,000 figure. So given this, what we're suggesting this evening is that we have a stipulation related to a $100,000 contribution toward these costs by the developer, leaving the issue of how any other costs above $100,000 would be split between the city and the residents. Moving on to the issue of berms, there has been a lot of discussion related to berms and probably quite a bit of confusion related to the berms. Generally, the residents had expressed concern about the berm height and the elevation of the homes in the proposed development, and were also interested in landscape screening. The developer, through the process of us meeting, provided some additional cross-section detail for the berms and agreed to look a bit closer at the elevation of the homes. And there had been field work verification that staff was involved in last week, as well as the developer team. And at this point, I would like to pause and ask David Lay, the Public Works Director, to comment on this work that was undertaken and in some of the detail on the berms. David?
All right, thank you. Well, as Diane mentioned, we requested to receive some cross-sections from Schlegel, and so they provided those to us along 133rd Street, and so that provided the opportunity for us to verify the existing berm heights and then their proposed berm heights. We went out in the field early last week to measure the existing berm heights, and we struggled matching up the heights that Schlegel had provided us. And so at that point, this is on Tuesday, staff wrote the stipulation that was in your packet today, which was from last Wednesday. We discussed the issue with Schlegel last week. They went back out and surveyed the top of berm, the existing berm, and provided that information to us on Thursday. And so we went back out again today, and we are much closer on the berm heights from verifying what their field work is. So then we rewrote another stipulation on Friday, which is actually on this handout on the dais. And so I'd like to go through that so we can kind of hash it out, because I think we have an agreement. So the top stipulation underneath berm height, it's on page 6 of Exhibit A.
Is that the one labeled F?
Correct.
Okay.
I'll give everyone a little time here to find that exhibit.
It's turquoise. It's in Diane's memo dated March 6th, and it's several pages back. Turquoise with red ink under berm height.
Okay, that's on this. Yeah, it's hard to find. It's on the screen right now.
Okay, good.
Thank you for doing that. So the top stipulation there, F, that's in turquoise, that's the stipulation from last Friday. I do want to jump past that and go to the developer suggestions, because there's been quite a few emails back and forth over the weekend and into today, and I think we do have an agreement with what the developer proposes. And so they are recommending that they provided their plan, that they will build the berm to their plan and then provide an as-built grading plan prior to a TCO for any of their buildings on that site. And then staff will verify that the berm is within 4 inches of their design. And so that's been agreed to through the HOA reps and the developer. Or it could be 4 inches, so if they're, whatever their elevation is proposed, it would have to be within no more than 4 inches below what they propose. It could be higher, just can't be more than 4 inches below.
So,
And that would be...
Mr. Lay, is that G then?
That would be G, the developer suggest.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
So yeah, that's all I have, and that's what we would recommend moving forward with.
Okay. Thank you for that. Oh, Mr.
Thank you,
Sipple?
Madam Mayor. David, are we believing that we're going to be the same height or higher than the north side of the street, or within 4 inches of what?
It's 4 inches of their submitted design plan that they provided to us
Right.
on Thursday.
And that design plan, how does the north side and the south side of 133rd compare?
Well, they vary. So, but on average, if you were to look at all the berm heights
Right.
for this corridor, they would be a little bit higher on average.
On the
Not-
south side?
On the south side.
Right, okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lay, that was in our set that we received Friday evening,
Their
correct?
cross sections, yes, it was in your
I think
packet.
it was, along with lots of other information. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Thank you,
Oh,
David.
Ms. Kane?
Are we to ask questions now, or are we going to just hear this presentation and
Well,
then?
I think she's going to go through it, but if you have a question on this specific thing.
Well, I definitely
Well,
do,
Mr. Lay is
and
here.
in the last item as well. But I'm okay to hold my questions
Ms.
until the
Stoddard,
presentation.
do you want to finish your presentation before we take questions?
Maybe that might be easiest, just to kind of
Okay.
lay out all the various issues, if that would be acceptable, Mayor.
Sure. No, that's fine.
Okay, great. Thank you, David, for providing that information about the berms. And then the third major issue that was discussed had to do with the roof design and the architectural style. So on this, the HOA representatives expressed a desire for the pitched roofs and indicated a preference for the more traditional architectural aesthetic that was provided during the preliminary plan phase. And the developer, through the process, indicated a willingness to place pitched roofs on the twin villas and the mansion-style apartments, subject to amending the code to allow composition shingle roofs and external downspouts. The developer provided some of this additional comparison detail on this in some drawings that were submitted, dated March the 1st in your packet. And I believe those were the drawings that you also received on Friday in a fairly large size, so that you could take a look at those comparisons. The developer had comparisons of the flat roof to a pitched roof style. It didn't appear that the parties were very apart on these issues, except perhaps on the issue of the architectural aesthetic, which there was a feeling that the aesthetic presented during the preliminary plan phase was a bit more traditional, and the plan most recently submitted was a little more modern. And then I'll note on the other two issues that came up, there was a little bit less focus on these issues, I would say. So these are outside of the three major issues. But there was a request from the HOA representatives at the meeting last week to have the developer build the planned multi-use trail that circles the church, which is part of a future phase, as part of phase 2, which would be done with this development instead of waiting until the later phases. The developer did provide a response in the meeting that they are building a trail through to the south on the east edge of this part of the development. But with regard to the area that is around the church that showed up as part of some proposed future development, that the developer intends on resubmitting some plans related to that area, so the location of that trail might change in the future. There was also an indication by the HOA group to request some additional, more retail in earlier phases of this plan, and the developer provided a response in the meetings that rooftops are really needed for the retail, that they would build the retail as soon as possible, but couldn't build speculative retail at the early part of the phases. And now I'll shift over to the memo that is in front of you on the dais that we updated this afternoon. And I will say that we did provide this memo to the HOA representatives and the developer team. What we were trying to do here is update a list of possible stipulations related to some of the comments and input that David shared earlier, and some other minor revisions. This revises a recommended, or a list of possible stipulations that were included in the packet on Friday. So you'll note that there were several different, there was some redlining on the document that I'll go through. And then we also did mark with blue any of the changes that were made from the document that appeared in the packet. And the intention with this list of possible stipulations was to sort of organize a variety of information and memos and things that had been provided going back to the February 6th meeting, even, and related to the proposed stipulations coming from the Planning Commission. So we did include here, for your consideration this evening, that in order to approve this development, this may be a possible motion for you to consider, looking at the stipulations that I'll go through momentarily that are provided on the attachment, as well as additional stipulations, which we labeled with a letter label, and we inadvertently left out G here. But all of those are outlined so that as you're making a motion this evening, you could choose to include these by reference, and that may be helpful. And then there's also a possible motion related to a denial for this case. So shifting to the actual document that includes the stipulations, and I'll just try and scroll a little slowly up here to the top for you. This is a document that, again, provides at the beginning, these first stipulations are stipulations that had come from the Planning Commission recommendation, and these were provided in the February 6th commission or the council packet. And you'll note that we've made a couple of adjustments to some of these stipulations because it relates to some stipulations that we spell out in further detail at the end of this document. So those are noted in red if we had a deletion. And again, these first 40 were ones that had been seen previously. And then we get to a section that I wanted to point out here related to some additional stipulations. And we recapped here in this section, electric vehicle charging and solar. This was provided in a memo to the governing body with the February 6th packet. And again, just for ease of having everything in one place, we wanted to include these at that time. Again, there hasn't been really any discussion between the parties on this topic since the February meeting. And we'll scroll down here to the traffic calming. And as I mentioned earlier, we did include here the suggestion from Rachel Rubin as an HOA representative related to the 5 points that she had provided with the developer on this topic of traffic calming, and therefore their suggested changes related to or their suggested stipulation related to the traffic calming issue. And staff had provided this item E, which would reflect, again, as I mentioned, trying to capture the 100,000 from the developer at this phase, but leaving the question of how any other costs would be split until such time that those costs are known. And as David went over earlier, we have the various suggestions that had come in with the berm height. And again, it appears that the developer's suggestion G did appear to be supported by all the parties. And finally, we had a suggested stipulation with regard to the pitched roofs and the shingle issue. And this would envision a request to amend the development code to allow composition roof shingles on multifamily buildings, that the twin villas and the mansion style apartments be constructed with the materials colors documented in the record with the pitched roofs and be substantially similar to the elevations shown in the meeting. And if the amendment on shingles is denied, then the developer would submit a request for a final plan solely for the approval of those alternative elevations. And let me see, I will try and stop sharing, or maybe, let's see, find my button here for that. let's see. I don't know if someone who's helping with the control of the Zoom might be able to help me stop sharing that. I'll see if they can. At that, I'll pause and ask if either Ms. Bennett, Mr. Klein, or Mr. Lay have anything additional to add from my comments that I made. Well, thank you for that help with that. And if not, that would conclude my remarks. Be happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Stoddard. Mr. Klein, I'll look at you first. Do you have any?
Just with regard to the pitched roofs, I did talk with the applicant, and they actually made this comment when we had the meetings with both the HOA representatives and staff, that they would be using the same materials and colors that they are shown on the elevations for the flat roofs. The difference would be the footprints would be the same. The only difference would really be as far as the pitched roof element that's on that.
They would be using the same materials on the flat roofs?
No, they'd be using the same materials. As far as the footprints of the buildings wouldn't change. It would just be adding a pitched roof to it.
Oh.
But the materials and colors would remain the same as what they showed for the ones that are the flat roofs on the building itself.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Ms. Bennett, do you have anything to add? Mr. Lay, do you have anything further? All right, well then I guess we're ready for questions. And Ms. Kane, you had your hand up.
I guess I'll start with the first thing that Ms. Stoddard started with, and that is the traffic calming possible stipulation tonight, depending upon how things go. I am chair of the Public Works Committee, so I've spent, and so is Mr. Osmond and Mr. Rawlings and Chuck Sipple. So there's 4 out of 8 of us that sit on the Public Works Committee. So we've been even more up close and personal on this item than some of the other co-counsel. I should have said prior. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the citizens. I want to thank the development team for taking this last month to, dive deeper into some of these issues. It pains me, not only me, but pains me terribly that we literally have stacks, inches of emails from more residents than I've ever seen personally in 14 years sitting up here objecting to an item ever in 14 years. I'm not alone in saying we take this very seriously. And that's why, once again, I'm a believer, and we are all a believer in our processes of making sure everybody feels heard and respected. We did read for hours and hours and hours every one of your emails, even though they were flying in even today. Over the weekend, they were flying in today. There was, 40 today alone, something like that, a big number. So I want to thank everyone for your emails and your time and your diligence, again, residents as well as the development team, as well as all of my co-counsel that spent hours and hours, and our staff. So thank you one and all. I should have started with that. I beg your pardon. So, going back to traffic calming, again, I've read all the emails. I've read all the suggestions. I respect that the Homes Association and Curtis Holland, on behalf of the development team, have come to an agreement, but this councilwoman is not in agreement with these 5 points as written on this email that Ms. Stoddard just went through, and I want to explain why. Again, being chair of Public Works and spending a lot of time on this, I think we're missing some important points on this. And we've never said, number one, it says developer and city will pay 50-50. That was never ever stated. So that was a nice idea, but that was something that never came up. To this day, I am not alone. I believe I heard and I understood, and we moved forward with the agreement. Under the agreement, this is my understanding, that the developer would pay $200,000, and that would be non-refundable. To this day, I stand by what I heard, And I wish we had codified that back when it was said originally. We did not. We can't undo that. But I stand by what I heard and what I understood. It's too bad that it went down the way it did, but nonetheless, we're here where we are. At first, it was 200,000, then it was 30,000. Last meeting, Mr. Odo agreed to go to 80,000. Now it appears Mr. Odo has agreed to go to 100,000. And again, I understood it to be 200,000. And I did say on the record more than once that the petitioners will pay zero for traffic calming and no benefit district imposed, but that was, again, I said that when we were thinking this $200,000 was being dedicated, there was a finite number to it. But and then it talks about number 4, if the final traffic calming plan costs less than $200,000, the developer and city will split said lesser amounts 50-50. And then developers not involved in the design or planning process for traffic calming measures. That one, again, I'm one person up here, but that one I agree with. They never wanted to be, and nor should I think they should be. That's between the city and the whatever professionals we happen to hire. So again, one of the zillions of emails we gave brought up a super important point, and this really rung true, and I highlighted in green. It has stickies and everything else. And this actually came from Kathy Kelly today, I think, at 3:05 p.m. So, yes, I read every one of your emails, and I'm sure everybody else did too. Although it has been said that every school area has traffic problems, and you've heard that over and over and over, right? I ask you, in what other school area in Leawood is Leawood proposing to add 20,000 cars per day? Now, I'm happy to listen to the development team and their traffic engineer, and the number she used was 20,000 cars a day. I'm sure that was pulled from some study somewhere. I don't know if she means coming towards Mission Road, going towards State Line. I don't know. The traffic engineer for the development team could bring that up, and I don't know that it's material, but I don't know that we have to dive deep into that 20,000 cars per day per se. But I think it's a super important point that this development is adding an enormous number of trip charges every day from the residents that will be living there. And what she doesn't say, Ms. Kelly, in this email, but what I think is equally important is the 135th Street and Mission Road corridor, right? This is Price Chopper here, as we're talking everything east of Price Chopper, right? Well, guess what? 3 other corners of that intersection are not developed at all. They're not developed. So those 3 intersections will be generating trips, right? So we're not just talking, unfortunately, and this is not the responsibility of the developer to mitigate for further development, but nonetheless, this is a unique situation. There is not, for my Cole Council, there is not another school area that is a main route to school and on the bike ride and has a development where this one development alone, whatever thousands of cars you're talking about, whether it's 20 or it should be 15 because some of these are going a different direction, it doesn't matter. But that is a true statement. We have all the traffic coming from this new development. We have the traffic coming. We will eventually have the traffic coming from the other 3 corners as well. So this will set a precedent. It will set a precedent because, again, we're talking about this development on that quadrant, right? But we're going to have 3 other quadrants. We have HOAs that are going to be driving traffic, and I think we need to carefully look at this stipulation. I don't believe the way it's written is in my opinion, is taking everything into account. I don't think it should be a 50-50 split. I personally think we should go back to the 200,000 that Mr. Odo, it was my understanding that Mr. Odo dedicated knowing, once again, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I know some of this traffic was premeditated. I know the residents back in 10 years ago or whatever it was had brought this item before us. But this was a concession, as I understood it, this was a concession to get approval from this, for this development. It wasn't, this was a concession based on getting an approval. It wasn't being driven by a prior existing condition. So what this doesn't say, and what's the missing piece here is what happens if, again, I think a lot of people thought there was a cap, the 200,000. The way this stipulation is written, there isn't a cap there. There's a cap for the development team, but there's not a cap for the city. So again, in a perfect world, we could, that's 0.85 miles, 0.85 miles from 132nd up through High Drive leading to 133rd Street. 0.85 miles. Will that cost 30? Nobody seems to think, though. Will it cost 50? Will it cost 100? Will it cost, could we come up with a plan for $500,000 and have a big fountain going down the middle? Probably. Should we? Guess whose responsibility that would be as it's written? That means that massive burden of not having a cap falls upon the city. As it's written, the Homes Association doesn't want to have any responsibility. So again, even as chair, there's no way, as it's written, well, it doesn't talk about a cap. It just deflects anything over 100. We'll discuss the mechanism. So I urge us tonight to put some kind of a cap in there, and also, if ultimately, depending upon what my co-counsel decide, if this council thinks the 200,000 was said and understood, not codified, I'll give you that. Mr. Holland did say, I said it last time, I'll say it again, Mr. Holland brought up that I don't know how many meetings ago that was to be refunded, but it is my understanding that also later in that discussion it was brought up by staff that came into question. Is it refunded? Is it not refunded? So that was my understanding at the end of that meeting. But we have to set some kind of a cap. We can't just make it uncapped for the sake of some huge idea that might be wonderful if we had trees lined with money in Leawood, but contrary to a lot of popular belief, we don't. So I don't like the way this, I don't think this doesn't cap it, and I think we should be very careful with how, if we get there, I think we should be very careful with how that stipulation is written. Otherwise, there is no cap on the homeowner. Well, the homeowners want zero responsibility. There's no cap on the city's responsibility. There's a $100,000 cap on the developer's responsibility. So we have to be very careful there. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got another hand up, but we've really gone out of order here. We have a presentation from the development team, and then some questions from you all. And then we're going to hear from the citizens, and then more deliberation.
Oh, I thought you asked.
Well, you had a question during Ms. Stoddard's. She wanted to get through her presentation, but
Sorry.
no,
Sorry
that's
if
fine.
I thought that's what I was supposed to do.
I did ask you to. I recognized your questions.
Okay.
Certainly. And Ms. Philly, you've got a question before we hear from the.
I really wanted to make some remarks in context of this particular comment, and I do agree with Councilmember Kane that having no limit on it is an issue. I also thought that the point being brought up that there is, for instance, and I'm going to ask Mr. Klein's help, but I know that we're looking at 5-story apartments on the southeast and southwest?
Straight south.
Straight south. So there's going to be, maybe you could quantify that more eloquently.
Yeah, I believe that Commissioner Kane is, or governing body member Kane, I'm sorry, governing body Villa, Councilwoman Villa, is talking with regard to 135 mixed-use development that's located on the south side of 135th Street. They're currently approved for 3 basically 5-story buildings. It'll be on the southwest corner of what will be 135th Street and High Drive. It'll have 193 apartment units as part of that, along with a small amount of office as well as residential or retail.
Thank you. And the other, so I have, part of me is thinking that we need to ask this opportunity to be shared in the future for other developments that are within this school commute. And I also want to really come back to the fact that having the citizens pay zero is not in our policy. I don't think the folks that on 85th Terrace are paying $300 a month for their special benefit district.
No, a year.
A year, sorry. So that's what, $10 a month? So they are all doing that for 20 years to pay for the 3 traffic tables that they have. And that's what it's designed to be for the existing traffic. There's no one else that is involved in the existing traffic issues that the citizens are talking about. And so therefore, I think that it behooves them to be owning that with and putting their dollars where they're as part of their commitment, because that's who's being impacted by not the future of any of these other developments. I always anticipated that the $200,000 should be set aside as a line of credit for the unanticipated, but yet we don't know what it's going to look like, but that there may in fact be other issues coming forward. But the idea that you could, with no limits and no understanding what the constraint is for a top number for the project, and no involvement by the citizens for what is the most cost effective, then I think we're out of balance in trying to find the right solution. And I think bringing in the future costs of perhaps other developers and their impact on the school traffic is something to be considered when they come in through their final plans. So I think it's a bigger issue, and I think it's a good point made. I think the citizens need to participate, whether we just say the first 50, the first 100. You have a lot more residents participating in the special benefit district. So at 100,000, it would be a much lower yearly cost, but it would be to address the traffic for those residents today with the issues they have today, not caused by anybody else. And then also whatever agreement, I do like the idea of a letter of credit for future, and it has to have a cap to what the city's involvement in, and that isn't specified. So I agree with your points.
All right, are we ready to hear from the development team for their presentation? Okay. Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome again.
And if you'll introduce yourself for the record, please.
As if there's someone who doesn't know me, I'm Rick Odo, 15200 West 105th Terrace, Lackman, in Lenexa, Kansas, 66219. Thank you very much, Mayor and council members. Really appreciate meeting with you. As you know, it's been a long road, but after 3 years of planning, I believe the plan keeps getting better. I think we have a plan that's there. A little over a year ago, though, we did receive our rezoning and our preliminary plan approval. I did rely on the city's ordinances or design approval process that states that if a plan's within 5% of its preliminary plan and meets the design ordinances, it shall be approved. Upon me getting my preliminary plan, I went ahead and closed on the entire site of this, including the retail portion. So I really took it, and I believe that just a few days ago at the recent Leawood Economic Development meeting, it was stated again that if a plan, what's it take to get a plan approved? And they said if a final plan is within 5% of its preliminary plan and meets the design ordinances, it should be approved. So I did rely on that and took down the whole site. Luckily, the plan is in compliance with the preliminary plan. the plan is in substantial compliance and it meets all the LDOs. I'm sorry. However, when we met last month, you asked our team to meet with the neighbors for a few issues, as we've been discussing. Diana Strider did a fantastic job of facilitating the meeting, and I believe that we are in agreement about 95% of the way there on the issues. So let me show you what our updates are and the three discussion issues. Is this on the board? Okay. Do they have a clicker or just hit this? Okay. I'll do this then. Okay, the plan is 100% compliance with the LDO and meets the approved PDP. We still saved an additional 2.2 acres of natural green space up from our preliminary plan. This site is substantially the same thing, minus 7 units. Actually, it's the exact same, minus 7 units. The density is 7.1 units to the acre in phase 1 and 2 combined, and we have increased our green space to 45% when the code's only 30. There's still the 9 parks in the first phases, 1 and 2, and this is new, we extended the trail along Kenneth Road south to 135th Street so we can connect better with the properties to the south when they get built. That was asked of us, and we were happy to oblige. Chadwick Park has been moved up from phase 3 to phase 2. So that's where we were in the past. Once again, I believe you guys all know we've got the single families between Pawnee and High Drive. We have twin villas from High Drive to the church, and then the rest of it is the mansion-style homes. And we do have 2 brownstone buildings here in the middle, if you can see that, where those arrows are. The neighborhood discussion, the financing of the traffic calming, which you were discussing, the landscaping of the berms to make them as tall as possible, and flat versus gable roofs with composite roofing. I believe we pretty much came to terms with most everybody on this. I'm going to go through this a little bit quicker. We agreed with Rachel Rubin's letter. She sent this out early about, and the reason why I was willing to go from 80,000 to 100 is because someone else was participating to help keep the cost down. That's the only reason why I was willing to go another 20, because I was willing to split that with somebody else. If it had been the neighbors or you all, I was willing to do that. As you know, this is not really the responsibility of the developer. This is new. And I do want to stress that we already spent about $1 million bending High Drive to offset it. We moved it 800 feet at $1,200 a foot to bend it, added an extra almost $1 million. That was the original concession to this for traffic calming, because if we moved High Drive the 600 feet to 800 feet to the west of the current High Drive, it would prevent people from shooting across to their High Drive. So we already conceded $1 million up front. Then I was asked to do a little bit more, and I keep giving and giving. So I feel like I've already done this. Plus, there is the other $165,000 of traffic excise tax that we pay towards this that helps the general fund offset these type of things. So I do feel like we're doing everything we can. When the neighbors presented this to be split between the city and us, I thought, hey, if the city's going to pay it, I'll go up even another 20 just to help somebody watching the dollars on this. And I appreciated that. When she suggested it, we had no issues. We accepted it. So we're trying to find agreement. As far as landscaping plan, I just want to go through some of this. We do have a view here looking on 133rd at the Twin Villas. I want to show you what they'll see. Once again, we've made the landscaping as tall as possible. That's my promise I made from the very beginning. We still maintain our 45% green space, 15% more than required. This is the view looking on from 133rd to the Twin Villas. As you can see, because of the berming, and we put on this one here, you can see we even show the pitched roofs. It adds extra screening to the apartments and everything to the south. We have what we believe is substantial landscaping along this berm. We've got 83 street trees required by the LDO. In addition to the 83 trees, we have an additional 237 trees along here, which includes 97 evergreens. We have 136 additional shrubs. The trees are placed from the middle to the top part of the berm, so all throughout. We have a very good screening of both the twin villas, let alone what's going on south of it. In total, we have 456 trees and shrubs on the 133rd in this half-mile area, which is about a tree or shrub every 3.5 to 4 feet. That is substantial. Anything more would just crowd everything out. Nothing would survive. The question about the berming, and I really appreciate what David Lay said. We went through, and this is a revised with all the updated numbers, where they currently are on the north side of the street. If you can see these numbers, you've got this in a few different ways. We had some with different numbers on them corrected. These are the final measured heights. The first time we went through, we had a drone. They don't always see through trees well, and they don't always see through the bushes. So we had some discrepancies. Then we went out and took some hard stakes, and all the spots are where these red lines are drawn. Where you see green, these are the numbers that the berms are virtually the exact same, 410, 410, 69, 68. You see virtually the same numbers within 1 inch of each other. And we have 5 locations like that. The red is where we are taller in 23 locations. So in 28 of 39 locations, we are the same or taller. Not only just taller, I said to make them as tall as possible. If you look here in the middle, if you can see where I'm circling here, we're at 5 feet, 5'2", 5'3". They're at 2, 2'9", 2'6". I didn't just make them where they are. I could have done that. I said I'd make them as tall as possible. We spent an extra $200,000 in more in additional storm drainage inlets so that we can allow for more flow. And we also did the same thing down here. If you can see this area, we're 5 feet, 4 feet, 5'4", 5'7". They're all 2'9", 2'10". So this is why we are averaging higher. There are a few places, don't forget, we are the downhill side of the watershed. The water flows from north through our property down to 135th and Neiman. It's really impossible to make everything taller than the north side when I'm the downhill side. We have to have areas where water flows through. Have to. And once we explained this to the neighbors, they understood it, but I still stuck to my promise of making these things as tall as possible. Instead of just matching them where I could lower these things 2 feet, I still kept them high. So I'm really trying to meet the intent of what everyone said. So 28 of 39 locations were the same or taller. That is a really hard engineering feat when you're downhill. I do want to bring up here's some cross sections. On the right side, this right here, we see this over here, 6358. This is the EV, our side of the street. On the other side, you've got the existing single family. As you see on the top, you got 133rd in the middle. The center line is the center of 133rd. You can see the different cut sections that we've got. I do want to go back up here. So we took those, which you saw on the previous page, are these 4, we took about in fourths, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can kind of see an idea where these cut sections are. You have in your packet all 39 locations where we crossed it. I'm just trying to show you that we have berms, as you can see, at 6 feet taller, 6 feet up. We've got a little bit of cut here. Some of them we got a little bit of fill. The one question that came up last time is why do we have 14 feet of fill? I didn't know where we were talking about. I didn't know what was going on. So we did look, and I do have it here. You can see where we've got this 14-foot fill here, 16-foot fill. And I'm going to show you why that happened. Oops, I'm going to come back to that. We have a depression. It used to be an old farm pond right here in the middle. If you'd walk down the street, there's actually a boat that sits way down in there. Mark Klein pointed out to me on the overhead, there's a little bit of water down in here. If you notice from right here to about 200 feet away, we jump 16 feet. So all we're trying to do is fill this hole so that this duplex on down to the east to this duplex flows in a proper area. We got to fill that 14 feet, 16 feet. So that's all that was. I also asked, since we met with the neighbors early on, and Ms. Stoddard asked me, can you raise them any higher? I went back to our engineers in the letter, and you have the packet with you. I asked him, can it be done anymore? And he said the same thing I'm trying to say here. The site generally drains from north to south to 135th. He's raised the berms as high on the south side to the maximum heights that we feel are attainable by adding storm inlets and piping in the rear to accommodate proper drainage. Anything further is going to flood out our homes. We've got to protect the future residents as well as the current. So just a little bit more in the berm sections, but I think we're all okay. The East Village berms are already as tall as they can be without causing flooding in the East Village homes. They've been raised from 3 to 5 feet originally to 4 to 7 feet. This is only accomplished by me spending another $200,000 on additional drainage. Most people would never do that. They let it flow naturally instead of putting all the storm inlets that we did in the backyards. The East Village berms are already higher than most of the berms on the south. As David said, we're higher than they are, which I showed you. 28 of 39 locations we are at or taller than them. The elevation of the lots is a function of grading to adequately drain from north to south, like we discussed. And even if the site was all single family, the whole thing, if we had berms there, these homes would still be at the same height as they are now. It has nothing to do with apartments. It's just a function of drainage, the 1.5% to 2% slopes, what we have at 133rd, what we have at Pawnee, to get it all to flow downhill to 135th and Kenneth. So I think I showed that. I do want to stress something before I turn it over. We do firmly believe that the twin villas should be pitched roofs with the composite roofs. We think that having them with the 8 to 10 feet taller roofs does a better job of screening. I also feel personally that it does a much better job of transitioning from the neighbors to the north through ours. If we have everything along 133rd with pitched and gable roofs, it's a very nice transition. I personally would still like to see our apartments. I think they fit in better with the flat roofs. You won't be able to see them from 133rd. But if the council decides they want us to have pitched roofs on the apartments with composites tile roofs, I'm happy to do so. At this point, I just want to comply and make everybody happy. This is why I've said that we've met in agreement with everybody, and we agree on the berms. We agree on the how we'd like to see the stuff funded, but I'm going to give you some options to pick on flat versus pitched, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Henry, our architect, our lead architect.
Henry Clover Architects, 8813 Penrose Lane, Lenexa, Kansas. What we're starting with here is the actual design criteria that you've seen previously, which actually is going to be related to the actual single families, and that we're asking for 2 different tiles. One is to be contemporary, which is actually what a lot of the buildings in the massing, even the apartments are, which is focus on clean lines, curves, irregular, asymmetrical facades with strong geometric shapes, larger windows. And then we also gave a transitional, which is where they blend other styles to come back together to get a little bit more of a contemporary look. These 2 images are you've seen previously, which talked about compatibility and cohesiveness. And from day one, we were trying to blend with the 135th Street corridor. We were also the architect for 135, which is very similar to this as well, which we thought was important to blend with. So what you're going to go back and forth here is this is where we're also showing the difference between the 2. So I'll go back, and you can see the 2 on the left change. The twin villas are the ones all the way to the right, which we're proposing to keep as a sloped roof. The 2 to the left is the mansion-style buildings. And so you can see going back and forth. I'll tweak back and forth the difference between the 2, which gives you an example between them. Below is obviously we aren't changing the brownstones, and then the single family, and then the luxury apartments, which will be a future phase. So that gives you the distinction between the 2. I'm going to run through fairly quickly, not to waste anybody's time. Happy to go back to any of them if you wish. But these are the twin villas. Style 1, which is the mostly stone, with the style front and rear. And then there's a style 2, which is the front and rear, which is more brick on the twin villas. This is the twin villa walkout, style 1, And as Mark said, the only difference is between them is we're still using the same materials and forms, but we're just putting hips and mansard roofs on them. I have to push the button 3 times, so I apologize. This is the brick version on the walkout, and these are ones that we are proposing to do no matter what. These are ones side by side. Now, there's a pro and con, obviously. If we do the hip and the mansard, or not the mansard, but the hips and the gable roofs, they get taller. I mean, so the buildings will be average of 8 feet taller. But the bigger thing, too, is we talked about the solar. And with the flat roof, you can get roughly 100%. With a sloped roof, you can get 25%. And that is also going to face it toward 135th Street because most of the sun will be on the south side facing 135th Street. So that is the con. We can still do everything we said we can do. We can still get it prepared for it. But that is the pro and con. With the flat roofs, you have the ability for more solar. With the sloped roofs, you don't. But as we said, we're happy to do either. And this will give you the various styles. This is the walkout style 1, which is the stone. This is the walkout style 2 with more brick. You see the difference between the two. The walkout style 2, which is brick. Then the slab on grade style 1, which is stone. The left side is obviously the flat. The right is the addition of the sloped roofs. Again, this is a close-up view. The only difference is on this one is we did have to pull the overhead canopy back a little bit because it got really kind of weird looking with that big slope hanging out there by itself. But that's the only difference between them and the overall cover, but the roof slope is there. This is the version 12-unit style 2 and 12-unit style 2 with a different view. 14-unit, which are basically the same. There's very little difference in between the two that you'll notice between the various styles and the materials. But obviously, it breaks it up into different patterns. They're both still incompatible with the design criteria and the contemporary look and the uses of forms and patterns. And this is, hang on a second. These are the brownstones, and those will stay very similar, but those are the two that are going to be on high drive as you go out. And then the clubhouse, which is still the same style, but we've got nice massing elements on either side of the entrance with big glass elements. And that is the end for me. Do you have it, Mark? Sure, you can put up front. And I can explain any materials. I'm happy to answer any questions at this point. I would like to turn it over to Kurt Holland unless you have questions for me.
Any questions for Mr. Clover before he turns it over to Mr. Holland? Ms. Kane?
I have a few. The freestanding homes in the twin villas are all maintenance provided, right?
Let Rick answer that question.
Yes, ma'am.
So does that mean that all the landscaping, the substantial landscaping, which we appreciate, the berms and the shrubs and all the trees, does that mean they're always going to be maintained by the Homes Association? That's part of the maintenance that's being provided. That's they're never the responsibility of the homeowners.
Correct, most definitely. I would not allow that to happen because we want to make sure that that's always maintained.
Okay, and then Mr. Odo, you said that this is just something that caught my ear when you said the last time I looked up the parcel of land, it still showed Rainier on where the Rainier owning, the Ames owning where the 4-story buildings are going to be, as well as the State Line Road. I know Ames can sometimes delay it by 1 or 2 weeks. Is you said you own the whole?
We're taking it down, the whole thing. We agreed to close on the whole thing. We own all of Phase 1, all of Phase 2.
Right.
And we're going to close in the next 30 days on the remaining phases.
Okay, and you're right. You do own Phase 1 and Phase 2,
Yeah,
but your Ames is not reporting that you own the other.
We'll be closing the next 30 days on those sites.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, because I know there can be a delay sometimes. So, And then I appreciate the Twin Villas. To me, from the original renditions, to me they look better because they look less modern, which we talked about that transition. And I also agree, believe it or not, with Mr. Clover with having 135th Street having harmonious from Regents Park up the way on down. I think that makes sense. I agree with that. What I don't agree with, and maybe this isn't the time to discuss this, so I can defer to the mayor or the co-council. But what I don't agree with is the original rendition of the mansion-style apartments. We've got the much more modern, and what you've done is they went from the original from way back when we were approving the preliminary by the skin of your teeth, with the mayor casting the deciding vote. But we were all, or the decisions were made with this facade, and I'm clear that the facades don't go until the final. I'm clear about that. But nonetheless, this is what the residents were expecting. This is what this councilwoman was expecting. Now we have the more modern view, which some will like and some won't like. But what I'm understanding, unless I'm missing something, here you're giving us two options with this modern view, but one with a flat and one with a pitch. We're not going back to what was on the original 3D rendition fly-through. That's what we all expected, and barely passed planning the first time, and barely passed planning commission. So and I mentioned this at the last meeting, that I wasn't alone in wanting to see these come back. That's what we expected. That's what we were told. And there's a big old difference between that and this, whether or not it has a pitched roof. So can you speak to that, please?
Okay, yeah, let's try finding that image.
Our technical guy will get you to the right spot.
There we go.
Yeah, faster than we can.
There you go. Thank you. I know. It took me.
And we
had to wade too through our material.
Right. We do want to finish up our presentation because we're not quite done yet.
I thought you were.
No, I said that we still had the
Questions for me?
right.
Well, these are questions from Mr. Clover now.
If you notice,
That's fine.
these are the exact same footprints, the left side, which you're shown, and the right. The only difference is we are required, and I'm going to let Henry speak to it, to meet the design.
When we got through this, one of the criteria of the city is that we need to keep the similar shapes, forms, and compatibility, not cause confusion. It's actually in the ordinance. And so we looked at it very hard about how to try and blend between the commercial, which was very contemporary, the commercial that's on the south side of the street, 135, our buildings, the luxury apartments, which we knew we wanted to do. And so that's how we came about with trying to get this presentation put together of the style and compatibility and the massing and the forms and the materials. These buildings are actually not the same footprint. Our building's a slightly different footprint. That's why you see the upper level has the bigger canopy and balcony area. I've been told for 20 some odd years that there are no approvals for the elevations on the preliminary plan.
No, I'm not. You're right.
Yes.
I'm not saying you're not right. I'm just saying this is what we were basing.
Well, there's not a whole lot of difference between these two. These are the two images. And the only image we ever gave you was that image. We never did it in 3D. We didn't drive through. We didn't drive around it. It shows up in the 3D model for only a brief period of time. Everything else we've driven through all the other buildings. Now, we think this is a good compromise. We don't have fireplaces in these buildings anymore, so there's not going to be fireplaces on it. And this is a little bit more traditional style, where the design criteria that we're establishing for the residents, even the single family, would have to comply with the building on the right, not the left, in terms of the style, the use of materials, the massing, the asymmetry, the larger windows. It's not as traditional, and it was never intended to be as traditional. So.
We had always said that we were going to update the plans to make sure that we had more consistent and more compatibility with our site, cohesive. We have to be cohesive. And That's why staff said that the plan that we have in place, or the elevations we have, meet LDO because they are compatible and they meet compatible within our own site. The other item, and I never want to argue with anybody, but I don't think there was complete agreement that everybody wanted what we would call we don't build this anymore because it's out of date. And I said all along we were going to come back with a more updated version that was be more compatible. This is more up to date. I wouldn't call it modern, but I call it more up to date plan. And we have to build to the future, not to the past. And we need to make sure that our plans are compliant with the rest of our buildings, along with 135th Street. And so we just feel that the marketplace would be more accepting of a more updated look than something that's a little bit more traditional. I don't know if I'd call that traditional because at the time it was considered super modern. But anyway, that's why we did where we are, because we don't think we'd have compatibility issues with one on the left. So if you don't mind, I'd like to go back and finish our...
I think Ms. Harrison
question.
has a question first for Mr. Clover.
I think this would be a question for Mr. Clover. On the freestanding homes,
Yes, ma'am.
is it owner's choice in terms of what style of home? So if I walk in there and put a deposit on a lot and I want a red brick front colonial home, can I build that in your neighborhood?
They have to comply with the design guidelines that have been established, and that was requested by the Planning Commission and the City Council to add.
So is that
To
a
try
yes
and-
or a no?
No, if it's a straight colonial, it would have to be more in a transitional style, where they'd have to blend different elements and characters together to get it to comply with criteria. So there has been a design guideline that was requested and established for the development.
Can you go back and show that screen?
It's
I know where it is.
You know.
Yeah. I will
we can get
also
back already.
remind people that Tuscany is one of all Italian design only. East Village of Leawood is a brick style only, colonial. There's lots of communities that have only one style. We are following the same tradition of doing that. We just have it blending in more with the compatibility and the cohesiveness of ours, and it's a nice transition from the north to the south that we felt, and that's how we got it approved.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now we'll hear from Mr. Holland, and that will complete your, and then there may be more questions from the council, because I know some of them are just dying to ask questions, I can tell.
Good evening, members of the council, Mayor. My name is Curtis Holland. I'm an attorney with Polsinelli, 900 West 48th Place, Kansas City, Missouri, 64112. Thank you for hearing us and giving us additional consideration of our changes. And we do want to thank the residents, especially the 5 folks, the representatives of the group that were picked to meet with. I honestly would tell you I didn't have high hopes we were going to get very far in that meeting, given kind of where we had been on our positions. But honestly, that was probably the best thing. I don't remember who recommended it, but the fact that we got to sit down and talk really, I think, helped.
Mr. Rawlings.
Thank you, Mr. Rawlings. I think it really helped move us in a better position, and we have reached, I think we feel, substantial compromise on all of the items with respect the list, the main 3 that we discussed, and I want to talk about that just very briefly, and then also mention the other stipulations. But on the track, and I don't have to talk long because it's already been said. I do want to thank the staff as well. I don't want to be remiss in not thanking Ms. Stoddard, Mark Klein, David Lay, Patty. They were very helpful in facilitating those meetings and collecting all of our different versions and assembling and getting to us to this point. And so I do want to say I thank them a lot for what they did. So with that, and this shouldn't take long because it's already been mentioned, we are in agreement on the traffic calming stipulation. I don't want to argue with Ms. Kane about what, you all thought, because, you have your own opinion, perception about what was approved a year ago, and I can't tell you whether that was important in your vote or not. It wasn't yours. I get that. But we have moved the ball. It may not be as far as you like. We have, as you know, a couple of months ago back, we were in here and were at one point seeking an approval of an agreement of contributing $30,000, if you remember that. And everybody put the brakes on that. And then last time we were here, Mr. Odo upped the ante, so to speak, to $80,000. And now we're at $100,000. So we have moved in this, moved towards the city in terms of what maybe you all like. But I do want to make a comment, too, about traffic calming. There is a letter in your packet that our traffic engineer, Kimley Horn, prepared to provide you with information as to the amount of trips or cut-through traffic that they believe would be generated by the project, East Village project. So they looked at phase 1, phase 2, what we're doing now, and then the rest of it. So, and what that letter said, and it's in your packet and part of the record, is that with respect, let me back up. Because we offset High Drive by a substantial margin, which I want you all to, hopefully to give us some credit that was a traffic calming measure, because that's really the intent of it, was to offset High Drive so that we wouldn't have, and it wouldn't make it attractive for a driver on the south side to go straight ahead and go up to High Drive, because most time, our intersections go right across from each other, right? But we did agree to offset it to deter any drivers wanting to do that. And not only did we do it with the approved preliminary plan, but we actually moved it even further with this final plan. And at considerable cost. It's roughly $1 million of cost that Mr. Odo is already investing in traffic calming, which we think is substantial, and hope that you acknowledge that. I would also point out that the city itself has made substantial investments in traffic improvements along Mission Road, and we appreciate that and understand that you're doing that. So there is a contribution by the city as well as the developer already. But according to the Kimley Horn letter, what they believe is because of the offset of High Drive, it really is not, if you're a driver, as we all are, very easy or something that we prefer to do to drive east, which is what would have to happen. You'd have to come up to 133rd Street if you want to take this route that they're suggesting be done to cut through. You have to get up to 133rd Street, take a right, drive, I don't know if it's 600 or 800 feet, but it's a distance to go back right. So you're waiting for traffic to pass. Then you get out and go right. And then you get to go up to High Drive, and you're waiting for other oncoming traffic to come this way before you can take a left up High Drive. So you finally get up High Drive, and you're going on this road, and there's cars on each side and so on and so forth. It is a longer trip. It's not convenient. And so the letter says that he doesn't believe, our traffic engineer says, we don't think there'll be any of our trips from phase 1 or 2 going back east to come north and west to get to go north on Mission Road. So we don't think there's any trips being generated that would add to the cut-throughs on High Drive and Mission. Or 132nd Street. You can choose to believe it or not. It's a professional engineer. That's what they believe. They did look at the east side, and they do think that there might be a better opportunity for the development on the east side and for drivers coming out to make that cut through, if you will. Turn right on High Drive to avoid going all the way to 133rd or to Mission Road. Let's just cut up High Drive and get to Mission Road, go north this way. There are not a lot of trips. Still, they say there might be approximately 7 to 8 in the peak AM and peak hours. So we're talking not very many trips. That this development, East Village, would contribute to this cut-through. And I'm not denying that there's not some cut-throughs. They experience it. But I am saying that based on the letter from the professional traffic engineer, that we don't believe that this project is going to contribute very much to that issue. Having said that, again, we've already contributed $1 million. We're willing to go another $100,000. As Mr. Odo said, we've got to pay some transportation fees as part of our project. Just the amount for just this first 2 phases, $160,000 roughly. We still got to pay more on the east side for the development phases 5 and 6. So we are contributing substantially to traffic calming. So I just want to make that point, and hopefully that we get some acknowledgement for doing that. Having said that, we're in agreement with the stipulation as written or suggested by the homes associations. Berming, we've talked. I made a comment. I've been doing this a long time now, and I've never spent so much time talking about berms and really getting into the nitty-gritty and the precise detail of the berms. And I will tell you that the residents have a sincere interest in getting these berms as high as they can possibly be, and so do we. We are equally as determined to make these berms as high as they can be. They're grading issues, flooding issues. I don't want to go over that all again, but I do want to say that we have substantially raised these berms, and in the majority of the length of the road here, we are higher than the berms are on the north side. There's a couple spots we couldn't on the far east and west ends. It's just the way it is. We can't do anything about it. We would if we could. All right, so that's the traffic and the berm. I don't think I have any additional stipulations to show you on the screen. I do want to say that with respect to the stipulations in general, as gone over by Ms. Stoddard to you and as in your packet with the colored versions, we are in agreement with all of the stipulations that are in this packet. As indicated previously, with respect to the additional changes, we are in agreement with the electrical vehicle charging stations. We are okay with that. As far as the traffic calming, we've agreed to that per their recommended stipulation. We're okay with that. The berm height, I appreciate that we reached agreement finally, and I think Ms. Stoddard indicated, and I believe David Lay indicated, that we are in agreement with our version, which is version G in your packet. And then with regard to the pitched roofs, we're agreeable to the pitched roof. If that's what you guys want to do. It sounds like the majority of the residents want that. If that's what they want and you guys agree, we're fine doing that. So in closing, I would say we have met, really exceeded any hope that I thought we could get to sort of an agreement with everybody. And we're really at, I think, 98 or 90% the way there. Can't tell you we're in agreement with some of the minds up here and what you all may think, but we have reached, we believe, substantially agreement with the residents, and we do thank you for the suggestion and for this time to having met with them. So appreciate that. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to do that. And if there's any chance for us to come back after questions, and if there's some things that the residents say, we would like that opportunity. Thank you.
Well, the questions will probably be for you, and then I will allow you to come back after the residents speak. I do have a question for you, though, before we go to council questions, and that is regarding this traffic calming stipulation. I understood from staff in conversation today that you were, in addition, you said you're in agreement with what the residents suggested, but our staff did not suggest that stipulation and instead suggested E. I don't know if we have a phone ringing in here. E, and I was told that you were also in agreement with that.
So we would not be opposed if that was your position. Okay. We would agree to it. We're not going to fight you on it. All
right.
If that's what you want, we like theirs better.
Yes, I'm sure you do, but thank you for that spirit of cooperation. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can you rehash E?
E is the one proposed by our staff because we don't know the cost yet, because it's it looks like it has months longer to go through the Public Works Committee before we'll really know. And I do agree with Councilwoman Kane that we ought to have a cap on it. But I guess I'm thinking that 200,000 is a fine cap, if it would get to that. But what this says is there would be no more than 100,000 that the developer would pay. It just does not determine who would pay that last 100 if indeed it did come to 200. It could come to 105. You know, we don't know, and that's the problem right now. So,
Just one quick comment on that. We are in substantial agreement and will agree to it. We think if we're going to put up 100,000, it should be a $100,000 letter of credit, not a $200,000 letter of credit. But having said that, if the decision is for $200,000 letter of credit, we'll do that.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for any member of the development team? Ms. Kane?
Circling back to this $200,000 letter of credit, $100,000 commitment from the developer, I didn't allude to it, I flat out said it earlier. This stipulation E as written takes out that 50-50 concept. That was the homeowner's concept, never staff nor council's concept. So are you willing to, I guess for the sake of this language, commit the first $100,000? So if this project if the traffic calming ends up costing $120,000, who's understanding what? Is that $120,000, 60, and 60 because they threw in a 50-50, which we didn't present nor agree to? Or are you willing to put the first 100 toward whatever mediation is coming forward?
So although while we like theirs better, we would agree to that.
The first 50, the first 100.
Yeah, our commitment is up to 100. And if it's less than 100, we would expect it not to be, for us to be reimbursed for that. And we don't want to be responsible for more than 100. I think Mr. Commissioner or Councilman Osmond, you said, what if it's 200,000, or maybe it was 120,000 may have been your example. Who has
80,
to pay that?
I think, was his number.
Yeah.
Right.
160. Anyway, what if it's $250,000? Then what are you going to do?
Well,
Make the developer pay all of that?
No.
Okay, so, we're giving, and when we hope that there's some concession back and acknowledgement that we've already paid quite a bit or will pay quite a bit of money just to offset high drive. That's a calming measure that we are funding without help of anybody. But yes, to your answer, thank you.
That you agree to be the first $100,000.
Sure, if that's what everybody else is on board with.
Any other questions for any member of the development team? Ms. Harrison?
Thank you. On these drawings that we received, I think, on Friday, as I look at, I think it's Phase 5. And I'm a big picture thinker, so I know it's Phase 5. But there are people here in this room who live across the street from Phase 5, and so this might be a concern for them as well. I see a grocery store and an assisted living facility and a drive-through restaurant. Mark, am I correct in thinking that drive-through restaurants in Leawood need a special use permit?
Yes, and I think we also mentioned that at the time of preliminary as well.
It's ringing a bell, but I've slept since then, so I cannot remember that long ago. And I just can't remember what's changed on this. I know it's not been more than 5%, but it feels like. So they don't have a special use permit yet, but that's their hope for this space, to have a special use permit for a drive-through restaurant?
Yes, that's what they have on the plans. Basically, Leawood requires a special use permit to be issued to the operator, and so until they get an operator for that particular drive-through, they wouldn't get the special use permit because it would actually be for them.
So it's 95% certain there will be a drive-through restaurant there, or it's?
I guess it's possible, if they don't have the demand, that there wouldn't be a drive-through restaurant, in which case they probably wouldn't need a special use permit. They do need a special use permit for any drive-through that they have as far as the fast food.
and we haven't issued that yet.
No.
Okay. And the assisted living facility and the grocery store, these are hopes, or we've sold the property and we have buyers, or this is,
Well,
I thought one time there was
say
a...
one thing, I'll let Rick address it. We're here for phase 1 and 2. I appreciate those
That's
comments
true.
and questions.
That's true.
I think it's a little bit out in front for us to answer that. I know he's had conversations with many folks. I can't tell you who they are or what they were talking about. You'll see it, and if there's a requirement for, if we come in for a use that needs a special use permit, you'll get a chance to look at it and say yay or nay. But to your point, I know you've slept a lot since then. We all have, but I will remind you, this is, while there's been some comments that there's lots of changes, and I've seen a lot of the emails, there have been no changes to this preliminary development plan. Our final development plan is still in 100% consistent with it. And you can disagree about the design and the roofs and the architecture and so on, and I'm not going to get into that. But our final plans, the applications in front of you are 100% consistent, except any changes, and I'm talking about things like the berm or the gabled roofs or bringing $100,000 to the traffic calming issue. Those are concessions and changes we made in response to things that have been asked of us. But outside of that, I would love for someone to tell me how we are any different or not compliant with the approved preliminary development plan. So we think that we are, frankly, entitled to approval. I think that's what your ordinances say. And so we're hopeful that with our applications and the additional changes we've made and the meetings we've had, that we can get your support on it tonight. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Osmond?
Thank you. I think Mr. Holland answered the question pertaining to Zone 1, 2.
Phase
1, 2 is coming before us tonight. Anything else after that is pretty much, quote, a placeholder so that you can come back to us to say, this is what our plan is for this particular phase. And I know that in our district, in Ward 1, we had the same instance where residents were concerned about a drive-through or multiple drive-throughs. It was shown on the plan, but yet we know that they have to come back for a actual plan designated who they are, what is it actually a drive-through, not a drive-through, and a separate approval for that project. So I just wanted to clarify that's what would be happening for phases 3 through 5, 6.
You're absolutely correct with the caveat that it must comply with the approved preliminary development plan. At least that's the standard. And if it doesn't, it's a whole different deal. You got to go back to a revised. It'd be a revised preliminary development plan. It'd be public hearings. You get all your discretion to say yay or nay. But yes, you're correct.
So on phase 3, if you wanted to come back and put all retail on there instead of the mixed use portion, that is a change, and you would have to come back from the beginning then.
That's my understanding relative to
I'm seeing confirmation from our director of planning. He's nodding.
Yeah, the way that, yes.
Yeah.
Shorty.
Just a simple, thank you.
But just not for the entire preliminary development plan, but that part that remains to be developed.
Right.
Yes,
That's
we
phase.
agree.
Mr. Sipple?
I just had one more question for Mr. Holland. I think I tracked what you said about the sharing of the costs on the berm, on the traffic calming. And you're saying the developer would put up the first 100, and if the traffic calming that was agreed to was $97,000, the developer would have picked up the entire tab without the city sharing.
Yeah, and that example would get $3,000, a whopping $3,000 back, but yes.
Well, we wouldn't have spent it, and so he would get that money
correct.
back. And so either the city or the neighbors are on the hook for whatever is over $100,000 in the proposal that's on the table.
I'm not going to say who
I know,
has that.
it's
who's
either
that, but
or nobody, so, right.
as long as it's not us.
Okay, but Rick, or Mr. Roto will go ahead and he'll pop for the first 100,000 of traffic calming infrastructure.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Villa?
I appreciate we have to discuss the cap on this, but I still would like to have citizen, and I was going to ask David Lay, could you share the mechanics of the special benefit district for 85th Terrace, the number of residents, the cost, and how's that being paid for by the citizens?
On 85th Terrace, the cost was around $85,000 for the 3 raised intersections, and there are approximately 30 homes. And so they are paying on the benefit district. It's over a 10-year period, and so they pay annually, I think it was a little over $300 per year for each property.
Okay, thank you. And if let's say it was 100,000, just for rounding purposes, for the High Drive, and they have how many residents on that?
I believe there's 70.
So 100, and that would, I can't do math in my head if anybody can, and then that would be over a 10-year period?
Correct.
So it's a pretty
So it'd
minor.
be about 150, I believe, 150 a year if it was $100,000.
So about $10 a month, or a little bit more. All righty. I just kind of wanted to go through the math, and the question is that our policy says that the weight is borne for traffic calming by the citizens. You have to have X%, and the X% is?
For the benefit district, it's 75% of the property owners to sign another petition to move forward with the permanent installation.
So that's what these folks did on 85th Terrace, and I have a concern that we change that for this circumstances. I also could talk myself into a 3-way split, but that is not the plan. It's supposed to be 100% citizens because the traffic issues today are not related to the development nor anything. And I do appreciate, because I went to drive along High Drive my day of berm watching, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out why anyone would want to cut through High Drive. In terms of going straight and then taking a right on Mission. Fact is, I'd probably try to go on State Line if it was school hours. I mean, I have the option when I leave my house and know that Curie is leaving, I will go 2 blocks to Lee Boulevard and try and circumvent that whole pickup area. So people do try to avoid congestion when they know, and it's regular, right? So thank you for going through the math on that for the group.
And while this is interesting discussion about this beyond the 100,000, I still think it's prudent to take staff's recommendation and wait on this because we don't know what your Public Works Committee is going to ultimately recommend to this group.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I hear you and I respect what you're saying, but it's certainly my understanding, again, and this can work further, that this concession is outside of our policy guidelines. And it was understood from the beginning, Mr. Lambert said it, it's been many an email going back and forth that saying that the residents were not responsible for fiscally. But again, I believe we have to put some kind of a cap, in case they come back with a $500,000 idea, gold paved streets or something. Can I ask one more question? Because I'm not so sure the residents are super clear, and we saw a bunch of emails go back and forth about some of the residents were talking about retaining walls on that berm. From what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, there are no retaining walls. I just want it to be said on the record so that whoever in the emails that mentioned retaining walls understand that, or can you speak to retaining walls?
Yeah, I asked our staff about that, and first of all, if you put a retaining wall up, it would mess with everything else, all the grading we have on. Second, you couldn't put trees within about 10 to 15 feet of them because otherwise you push the retaining walls away. So now we're pulling trees further down the hill instead of bringing them up higher on the hill. So it actually ends up lessening our tree and landscaping screening that we're trying to do. And I think that'd be counterproductive. Plus, it actually works, and again, it works against us with all the storm drainage we did. The storm inlets on the backyards is the best way to go.
I just want to make sure that we're clear before the residents speak that again, there's not a gray area.
I even asked it first. I was the one who threw it out first if there was an option to my staff to do that, and then they quickly shot me down, which happens. And they said, let's go with this one. This does what you're trying to do, and yet you can still put the trees all the way to the top. So we thought that was a much better way to go.
Thank you for the clarification for the residents.
Mr. Asseltine.
Thank you, Mayor. In reverse back to the whole traffic calming thing, I appreciate the work that went into this Exhibit A that the staff and the citizens came up with. And I was initially concerned about setting a precedent and involving a benefit district because that would really equate to special treatment when there may be other benefit districts, and I was worried about the precedent. And the exhibit does say no benefit district imposed. I think that's very important to not set that precedent. And if the Public Works Committee decides in the future that may be warranted or not, I think that's the way to handle it. So,
all right, Mr. Rawlings.
One thing that I've never been clear about.
Is your mic on?
Councilwoman Keene's comment about the codification of the 200,000. Scott is not here. We've got emails that said they will not be responsible for the first 200,000. Did he say that to anybody on the staff or to the Homes Association people? However, the ordinance says if it's at some point in time, you will be required to consider a special benefit district if you choose to do so. The reason I ask that is because Scott, as a city administrator, had the authority to look at any kind of expense up to and including $25,000, and that still is in effect today. But he would not have the authority to waive the special benefit district without coming to council first, and that did not happen. Now, having said that, somebody tell me, am I right or wrong? How do we fix this? Did he specifically tell the Homes Association you will not be required to be encumbered by a special benefit district? I'm asking the staff and the Homes Association.
We're looking at Ms. Bennett and Mr. Klein. I think one of them might have the answer.
Actually, the email that I wrote as far as on January 3rd, 2022, it did indicate as far as that the applicant would give a $200,000 letter of credit. I do believe that it said that it would have to follow as far as a certain number of people that would be basically a threshold that they'd have to meet.
Well, I understand the threshold.
Overall, I think that Mr. Lambers looked at this as a little bit outside the regular policy since the developer was offering to put up money. The question was how much was the developer offering to put up and not be reimbursed? So it was a little bit different. The benefit district policy normally would have all of it or most of it imposed upon the residents. It does allow the city to determine other sources of funding. In this case, the main source of funding apparently was intended to be from the developer.
$200,000.
I understand what you just said, 200,000, the main source of expense. But it's still, what happens after the 200,000? I mean, who's, we're going to set a cap, and I think it's 200,000. What happens if it's 300,000?
I don't think that was ever addressed.
Well, that's my question. Because if it's over 200,000, then the council will have another decision to make again on whether we want to spend that kind of money, or if we don't have a cap, then we'd be encumbering a future council of something that they would have no control over. So I think that
you sit on the Public Works Committee.
I do.
Do you not? So you'll have a lot of time to discuss this.
Yeah.
Ms. Harrison?
Thank you. Mark, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm asking it in part so that people who are here and concerned about this traffic calming can hear it. Ultimately, who decides what kind of a traffic calming measure would be installed if a traffic calming measure is installed?
That would be as far as the Public Works Committee and through the process that they're currently going through would determine as far as which traffic calming device would be used.
So the Public Works Committee, probably with the staff input, maybe engineers input,
Correct.
professionals who do this for a living?
And then the committee would make the recommendation to the whole governing body.
Okay.
But the residents are an
There's
integral
citizens
part
input
of
on
that.
that,
Well, and I ask this because there's been a survey sent out asking residents, and I
Right.
just want to
That's-
clarify
That's
who
part of the process.
ultimately makes the decision.
Well, they have 100% involvement in the process.
Mayor.
That's how it's been established.
Okay.
Yes, so they're 100% involved, and it's a back and forth dialogue. So yes.
Very good. My second is more of a comment, and I just respectfully disagree with what some of my fellow council members have said about setting a precedent. This is a unique situation with regard to this traffic calming because never, ever has there been in Leawood this kind of a development being considered across the street from a residential community and a half mile from an elementary school. So this is a unique situation, and unique situations, in my opinion, call for us to consider maybe outside of our general policies and procedures and funding something differently. When the folks that bought their homes in Waterford and Greenbrier and Wilshire Place bought their homes, they could not have imagined what would be going in over there. There were buffalo across the street when I bought my house in Waterford. And the Wilshire Place wasn't even there. It didn't, 132nd didn't cut through to High Drive, or I should say, 132nd didn't cut through to 133rd. It was a dead end. So there's no way when these folks, many of them are sitting here when they bought their homes, that they could have envisioned massive apartments because Leawood wasn't known for building those. So it is a different time. This is a different kind of project. Mixed use is now a part of our vocabulary. And if this kind of high-density residential is going to go in right across the street from single-family homes, then maybe we have a responsibility to think a little bit differently about how we pay for and install something like traffic calming. Thank you.
Mr. Azeltine and Mr. Osmond.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank the applicant for putting up $100,000 because not only are they not required to do that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Patty, but we're not allowed to make that a contingency of our vote tonight either. It's not part of the preliminary. This is an add-on. This is not a requirement for the preliminary to comply with the final. It's something that's being done. I'm glad it's being done. But as far as the amount over $200,000, that is a discussion, after this meeting has been gavelled out and for the Public Works Committee. So, yeah, exactly. That may not happen for quite a while. So,
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Osmond.
I think we've sat up here for 2 hours. We've listened. I'd love to hear from the residents because I think they've been waiting patiently.
I think they have too.
I think so.
I'm glad to hear that. And you'll have another opportunity, and the developer can address us after the residents. And we have 10 of you who signed in, and so I'm going to request you keep your remarks, please, to 5 minutes each. And just know that we have read. Most of you that have signed in, we've already received lots of correspondence as well. So please know that we have read it, and we do appreciate it. And I'll call on you in the order that you signed in. If you'll come forward, please, and state your name and address for the record. John Kelly.
I'm John Kelly. I live at 12800 Howe Drive in Leawood. I want to thank the council for convening the discussions with the developer and the residents. And I ask the council to continue to provide leadership to address the citizens' concerns. And while I listen tonight, I think there's been substantial progress, and I'm at arm's length to it, but I think there's been substantial progress. And as I listened, I decided to talk about baselines. I've listened. My first subject is about the berms. As you look at the LDO, Article 16.4.7 provides for substantial landscape and/or earth berms for properties that abut public right-of-ways or commercial areas to residential areas. And in both cases, it requires substantial landscaping. So for the developer to say, well, I added this, and this is a tactic that they've used time and time again. I'm adding this, I'm providing this special benefit. Well, but the baseline is the LDO, which is trees every 20 feet, shrubs, hedges, and even earth berms that would be equivalent. The other thing, and they talk about getting some credit for moving high drive. Well, I think at the very beginning, at the preliminary planning, they were against the street grid design. They started out with gated communities and no street grid design. So to say that they're moving high drive and that was a special concession is really not related to the traffic calming situation. And speaking of traffic calming and baselines, so the city is responsible for, in our streets anyway, for drainage, for lighting, for street design. So if you had a drainage problem, the streets were flooding, would you tell the residents to fix it themselves, to have a special benefit district? Would you tell the residents, well, your streetlights don't work right now, it's a special benefit district? The city laid out the streets. Many of you were on the 135th Street Planning Commission that was approved along with the Leawood Development Ordinance, and the design and layout and the traffic caused by development is in a large part responsibility of the city. You're widening Mission Road south of 135th. You're going to widen it and improve it north of 135th, and then you're going to approve all these mixed use and other developments. And we're talking about some $200,000 for traffic calming. Well, pretty soon, 10 years from now, you'll need a traffic light at 132nd Street in Mission. You'll need a traffic lights at 127th and Mission Road for all the additional traffic. And and you could simply solve the traffic calming by putting up stop signs everywhere. But nobody wants stop signs, and so then it's the residents who have to pay for special traffic calming processes. Like the baselines are not being thought of here about who's responsible for what and how it starts. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly, I do hope you're participating in the Public Works Committee meetings because you have a lot of good ideas. Thank you. Larry Gunja.
My name is Larry Gunja. I live at 13288 High Drive. I put my name on the list. I had nothing prepared, but I thought I'd take some notes tonight and had my name, so if I found something that piqued my interest, I would talk. First off, I'd like to thank everybody for coming together on the berms, the residents, the homeowners, and the development team. That's very much appreciated. But I'd more like to talk about the traffic calming. It seems that the development team thinks these are perceived traffic issues from the homeowners there. And I don't know anything about traffic. I don't know anything about planning, but I do know that I live on High Drive, 2 houses off of 133rd Street, right across the street from the development. I know that there's going to be more than 7 or 8 cars an hour in peak times coming down High Drive onto 132nd Street. Plain and simple, if you had a bunch of hamsters in a cage and you got all those little tubes and they run here and they run there, well, I'll tell you what, if you put 1,000 more hamsters in there, they're going to find other ways to get out of that cage. I guarantee it. Same thing's going to happen to the traffic, and the loophole is going to be 132nd Street and High Drive. Bear with me a second. I'm just going off my notes here. Mr. Odo, in a public letter to the commissioners here, he said that most of the complainers live blocks away from 133rd Street and won't see East Village from their homes. Well, I, for one, live 2 houses away from East Village, and I will see these homes, these apartments from my front yard, from my backyard, from my kitchen, from my garage. Anywhere, I will see them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as will all my neighbors that drive up and down High Drive on the corner of the intersection of 133rd and High Drive. So, yes, there will be plenty of people that will see them. I know there's more. Okay, I would like to ask a question of the development team. You guys, you call duplexes twin villas, you call massive apartments, what do we call them, mansion-style homes. What is the difference between a pitched roof and a gabled roof? You talk pitched and gabled, because I don't want to come back later and say, well, we said we do pitched, but pitched is like the slanted, and the gabled is the A-frame. So I'm like I say, I don't know design or any of that stuff. So me and some other residents would like that cleared up. And just what Mr. Holland said, he's not going to go down there, call it pitched, call it gabled. Of course you're not going to go down there, Mr. Holland, down that road, because it's in your benefit to do it whatever way you want to do it. I guess that's all I had to say. Just have to comment on what I heard here tonight. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gunja, and we'll ask the developer to address your questions when he addresses us again. Thank you. Steve Doerr.
Steve Doerr, 2211 West 132nd Street, Enclave at Cedar Point. Tonight I have a statement prepared by the board of the Enclave Board. The Enclave believes the developer should honor the terms of the preliminary plan as approved. The proposed changes are significant, and approval of these changes sets a precedent for all subsequent phases of the project. We are asking that the developer be held accountable to the preliminary plan and all promises and assurances made to the current residents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Doerr. Bob Pollock.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayor and Council. My name is Bob Pollock, and I live at 12300 Mohawk Lane, Leawood, Kansas. I didn't come prepared. I wasn't sure if I was going to speak, and if I did, I was hoping I could keep it brief and get you out of here. But some of the things that I've heard irritate me more than reading the letters that I've read. My first question is, what doesn't anyone understand about a letter of credit? Now, Mr. Odo has offered $100,000 to do traffic calming on a street that probably will never need it. But to digress, what don't you get about a letter of credit? He never committed to give $200,000 to do traffic calming. On traffic calming, I live in Leawood South. I've served as president and in many other capacities on my homeowners association. And if everyone in this room hasn't heard about the horrible 100-mile-an-hour traffic on Sagamore and Overbrook that loop through Leawood South and the request for speed bumps, I'm amazed. I had extensive conversations with the chief of police, and I don't know if it was David or Mark or who, but I was totally sold on the fact that traffic, and you don't call them bumps, you call them traffic tables. They don't work. How many do you have in Leawood? 3? All in one project? That's it? There are no traffic tables anywhere. What are you going to do to 132nd Street? You're going to put a fountain in the middle of it? Seriously? What are you going to do, roundabouts? Who's going to give up property for roundabouts? Where does, I mean, you came up with 30,000. I think that was probably Mr. Lay's assessment of what some traffic tables, which don't work, would cost. And here we are debating something that Mr. Odo is so sick of hearing. He's just said, you know what? Here's $100. I've already spent $1 million moving High Drive. It's not going to be an issue. It's an issue now. Why aren't they taking care of it? Why haven't they gone through the process that is well defined by the city and getting their speed bumps so that they can get to the stop sign headed westbound on 132nd at Mission and sit there the same amount of time? I've seen on Nextdoor them complain about the current issues they have. They can't get out of 132nd when it's school hours because there's traffic on Mission. There's no stoplight. There's already an issue. Why is this Mr. Odo's responsibility? But it's moot. He's agreed to give you the money. And again, it's so frustrating. What don't you guys get about letter of credit? This discussion on berms, my God. The thing that stuck out in the last meeting was one of the, and I call them influencers, talking about, we don't care if those single-family homes flood if we get our berm height. We don't care. That's not our problem. Those are going to be their neighbors. Is that really the way they want to treat their neighbors? You know, this Save Leawood is all based on fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And it would appear that a lot of you have bought into it. So the berms, the traffic calming, it's all a joke. The only issue that anyone could have at this juncture, after you've already approved it, is the fact that the developer is trying to go to a more contemporary and, in my personal opinion, a much more beautiful design. Okay? You know, he's come back there again and said, we'll do a pitched roof. And if anyone needs an explanation on what the difference in a hip and a gable, I can give it to them. But go look at some contemporary homes. I was driving down 435, and I'll wrap it up. I was driving down 435. I saw Mr. Odo's apartments in Lenexa. They're a contemporary flat roof. Okay, they're not flat, but they're a contemporary roof design, much like what he's proposing. They're beautiful. They stand out. Just on the left, if you drive a little further, you get some pitched, hip, and gable roofs on multifamily buildings, and they look like crap, pardon the expression. So I would like for you guys to vote, get this thing done. What other development has taken 3 years? I mean, this is ridiculous. Your process is broken. You can't do affordable housing in Leawood because you're ringing his tab up. God only knows how much every month this drags on. Vote, approve it, and give him the option to put the contemporary in there, please.
Thank you, Mr. Pollack.
Thank you.
Mark Casey.
Good evening. Mark Casey, 2204 Condoleezza Terrace in Leawood. Why are we here? It was a year and a half ago or longer that a planning commission meeting ended up being determined by the chair, who said why he didn't like what he was looking at, we might get stuck with something worse if he didn't vote in favor of it. So it comes to this board. At least twice, when it appeared that this would readily be voted down, you threw the developer a lifeline and said, we'll find a way, let them talk, let them work this out. There have been substantial changes to this plan. And contrary to what Mr. Holland said, and I believe is the position of your city attorney, those are substantial changes that require this to go back to planning and zoning or the planning committee and have another public hearing. I'll refer you to the email that you had received from Mr. Matthews. I know it was a rather lengthy one, but it had a great deal of detail, and it was very accurate as far as how he laid things out. This is a significant change. We're not changing light fixtures here. We're not changing the color of paint. We are changing the entire architectural aesthetic. And in spite of what Mr. Pollack just said, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I've also seen these flat roof buildings. They do nothing for me. This is a more traditional neighborhood, and to put these kind of buildings across the street is eminently unfair to the people that invested oftentimes their life savings in these buildings. This land is going to be developed. There's no doubt about that. The question is, what is the most appropriate way of developing this? This has been so piecemealed together at this point in time, I'm not sure anyone really knows what this plan is. I worked in this area for 45 years. I don't consider myself totally stupid, but I know that when I try to go through all this and peg everything together, it's extremely difficult. As a citizen, I should not be required to come to this final meeting and see things that are big changes. Those should have been presented back at the Planning Commission meeting. People have not had an opportunity to digest all this information. They have not had an opportunity to see how it fits into their community. There's a lot that needs to be considered here. I know there are several strong advocates for Mr. Odle. They've been advocates since the start. But I think the obligation of you as elected representatives for Leawood is to look at this and say, this is a major, major undertaking. It may be the biggest development that you ever approve, and it needs to be done right. And the manner that this has gone on, where the developer, when he gets his back against the wall, moves a little bit, back against the wall again, moves a little bit further, that has not resulted in what would be considered a good plan, in my opinion. And I think it's unfair to the citizens that we now have this plan, that if they compare that to the one that went to the Planning Commission a year and a half ago, they would say these are entirely different. So for that reason, I would respectfully request that you deny approving the plan tonight. And I think this really, it can be done, but it needs to start over. All these things that have been considered need to be put together where everybody can look at it and say, okay, we understand what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. Matthew Winston.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks again for your time and for listening to all of our public comments. So one of the things, and I was actually, you prepare comments for this, and then you come to the meeting and you hear what actually occurs. And honestly, I thought this was maybe one of the most productive conversations that has been held. I would, say that the healthier conversation is when we really look at what's before us tonight, what's before you tonight that you're going to vote on. And that's phase 1 and phase 2, plus a park. That's a really nice footprint of a transitional area south of 133rd Street. And I think as we consider that, that really helps for a much more healthy conversation. When we start talking about all the other phases, trust me, we're going to have time for that. And that doesn't need to be in tonight to confuse citizens, to confuse any of you either. The last meeting that we had 30 days ago, what came out of it was a decision. Great suggestion, as it turns out. You get credit when it works, and then you forget who did it when it doesn't work, right? But credit to you for putting together a group. That suggestion was then that the 2 ward leaders would select homeowners to represent. It was unanimously decided that that would be the case. Every one of you decided that that was a good plan. That's what happened. And what I would hope is that you would respect that process. The process wasn't fought. You didn't have homeowners come up and say, nope, that person doesn't represent us well, we don't want them on there. That was a great group of people who came together and really came together with the developer on some really good plans. Mr. Sipple, I'm going to go into a word that you said last time, which was the seeking of harmony. And what I just put out there is harmony really is a journey. It's not a decision. So the journey is what you see that has happened over the last 30 days. This is a journey. Started by one council member, engaged with the other 2. And I honestly would hope, I obviously live in your ward, and I think you guys know that, but Councilmember Sipple and Harrison, I hope that you would, of all people, respect this process that we went through. Representatives from your ward met and came to decisions. And in doing so, I do believe that for Phase 1 and Phase 2 and the park, that it does mean that you should vote to get this passed. I've mentioned before, I live on 133rd Street. This is the transition that I want as a resident. Again, I'm not going to talk about the other phases because tonight we're talking about Phase 1, Phase 2, and the park. I do just want to highlight from a couple other comments that have been made from other members. Councilmember Rawlings have already mentioned, again, I was interested to see how it would turn out, to say the least. It seems to have turned out very productive and conversation. Also to the city member who organized the whole thing and then gave us a really good summary of it. That was really good. Council members Phil and Azeltine, sorry, I always mispronounce your name. I've been impressed, I guess, with the process. I do feel, and I don't want to just single out others that maybe that I'm asking to change their vote, but I really do appreciate that you 2 have seemed to have a good core of the process. This is not easy what you do, and I truly appreciate what everybody does, but I also appreciate that you guys have taken kind of a lead in some of this. Mr. Osmond, you mentioned last time that there was kind of this challenge of trust. And what I believe is let's see Phase 1 and Phase 2 and the park, and the proof's in the pudding. And if that doesn't lead us to a place of more trust, it's a journey, just like harmony, then we'll have a different conversation down the road. You made comments, and I apologize because this is from the meeting minutes, so I'm not saying this is a direct quote from you. This is a direct quote from the meeting minutes when this council chose to approve the preliminary plan. He refers to you, so I'm going to replace that, but with your last name, if that's okay. Osmond pointed out that minor tweaks by the developer have been made or have made a large impact on the development, including curving High Drive to decrease cut-through traffic and cutting off the access point in the middle of the project to ensure multiple entries and exits. He also was in favor of the increased green space. While the project is not 100% favorable, he is considering the long-term plans of the city and sees the project as an opportunity and feels comfortable moving forward with the project. And I applaud you for those words, because those were early leader words of a debate. And the debate continues. We have an opportunity to achieve trust. We have an opportunity to journey down towards harmony with the approval of Phase 1, Phase 2, and the park. And then the last thing I would say is, again, I always encourage you that you are the leaders that we elected, and maybe we come hot and bothered with emails or things that we say to you, but there is a lot of respect for your group. Last time, Councilmember Harrison, you mentioned that you received some aggressive accusations of things of your involvement or kickbacks or whatever. I've shared in that, not probably to the degree that you have, but I would just tell you, we do appreciate all of you, and we do hope, that you know that. We only get to come and yell at you when their things are wrong. We don't always get to compliment you. So thank you for your time. I do hope that, again, with everything that's happened, that my ward members would approve Phase 1, Phase 2 in the park, and the others who have been on board for would do the same. And I look forward to actually seeing what happens in Phase 1 and Phase 2 in the park. And the rest of it we'll talk about later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winston. Mark Davidson.
Good evening, Mark Davidson. I've lived at 3400 West 132nd for almost 30 years. I remember llamas. There was a crop. There was no Wilshire Place, so Hyde didn't cut through. And yes, we've had traffic challenges over the years, but I think we're to a pretty good spot. I don't have strong opinions about the development or all that. There are plenty of those around here, but I do want to make sure I say the things that I had planned to. So I definitely want to thank you all, especially Mary Larson, who responded to every one of my emails, and Julie Kane, who's chairing the Public Works Committee. I really believe in that process. I intend to be very involved in it. I don't mind 7:30 meetings. I'm sure you all appreciate that they have a cutoff at 9, which is probably something maybe you'd consider for your meetings to have an end point. And then especially Lisa Harrison, who has been a strong advocate for Waterford, but also for all of Leawood, and I really appreciate everything that you've done. I agree with Ms. Kane that Mr. Odo committed to $200,000, and I know very well what a letter of credit is, but I think the implication, and then summarized by email, was that he would fund the $200,000. However, I respect the compromise that they came up with our neighborhood representatives, and I think that's a reasonable amount of money that could be spent on a solution that could really be something neat that we could all be proud of. And I think that's what I said at the last meeting. I just want to reiterate what I said. I've lived all over this metro area and been all over it. I still think Leawood is the best city in the metro area. And I think investing in this street, it is a unique situation, and it's a unique street. And it's not just because it's my street. It's just the way it's situated and how it's connected and all the other streets and all the other developments going on there. I think we could really make it something neat, safe, beautiful, and that's something that would make us still the best city in the metro area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Rachel Rubin.
Good evening. I'm Rachel Rubin, 3105 West 132nd Street. And I wanted to ask if the stipulation D could be put up on the screen. I don't know who can help me with that from staff. Ms. Kane, I wanted to address the comments you made about there not being a cap. In the stipulation that I drafted, there is a cap. This is stipulation D, and the cap, it's in line 6, so up to $200,000 in traffic calming improvements will be made on the corridor with costs split between the city and developer 50-50. Neither the city nor the developer shall pay more than $100,000 each in costs. So to me, that was the cap, and I just wasn't sure if you were looking at proposed stipulation D or proposed stipulation E. Stipulation E was drafted by the city, and it did not incorporate the compromise that we, reached with the developer. I understand we can't commit on behalf of the city. I totally understand that. I am not asking for gold-plated anything. I'm not asking for a fountain. We just want a safe street. The Public Works Department's doing a great job sending out surveys to find out what traffic calming measures the residents would like to see. And none of the options are gold-plated, or there are no fountains being offered. I do want to go back. I want to go back to the directive that we were given as representatives of the homeowners in the area, we were asked to find a compromise. We have been fighting, I mean all of us have been arguing about this for 3 years, and it's taken up a lot of everyone's time, a lot of emotional energy, a lot of intellectual energy as well. So we were asked to find some solutions and not to dig our heels in. So that was the impetus for this proposed solution as far as traffic calming. We wanted to find a compromise. The reason that the residents the petitioners think we should not have a benefit district imposed upon us is because that was never, ever the plan that was presented to us. I want to go back to Mr. Klein's memo, December 30th, 2021. The memo, I won't read it again because I know you all know it, but it says the developer will put up a letter of credit for $200,000. The residents had to get 51 petitioners to sign, which we got way more than that. And then it says the permanent improvements would be installed at the cost of the developer. Nothing was ever said about a benefit district. Nobody ever said to us that per the traffic calming policy, you're going to be required to pay for these improvements. There are 5 additional emails. I want to also back up and say, the emails are from staff. The emails are not from the council, okay? However, you voted on January 3rd, 2022 to approve the preliminary rezoning. And Mr. Klein's memo from 5 days prior was a part of that decision. So we, the residents, thought that we could rely on representations made by staff after that vote. We had no reason to question what they said to us. And that's a very reasonable position to make. You know, once the city council votes, then we need to be able to rely on the staff and the directives they give us and the representations that they make to us. And I think that's only fair. And all the 5 emails, no benefit district is discussed. This last email was from Mr. Klein. This was April 6th, 2022. This was after we submitted the petitions. Again, 86% participation in the petitions for traffic calming. It says the developer agreed to provide the city of Leawood with a 5-year, $200,000 letter of credit for the installation of traffic calming devices on adjoining residential streets as part of the preliminary plan process. Again, going back to your vote from January 3rd, 2022. This stipulation will be included with the final plan for the development. Please let me know if you have any other questions. I do have more comments. I want to talk about safety because this is really what we're talking about. 132nd and High Drive is the only safe route to school. I think in Leawood it's called the main route to school, but that's based on federal criteria that are established. It's the only designated main route to school in the city. And based on that, that was designated in 2017 by the city council. Based on that safe route to school, there should have been safety measures implemented previously to make it a safer way for kids to walk and bike to Mission Trail Elementary. That hasn't happened yet. However, we're making great progress in the Public Works Committee with Ms. Kane and Mr. Lay with their leadership. It's going very well. Mr. Lay indicated to me a couple things. The city will take advantage of advantageous pricing for any improvements on 132nd and High Drive, and that's because the improvements will be included in the resurfacing, the annual resurfacing bid. So that way we can get better pricing that would try to save everyone money. We're trying to save everyone money. We're not asking for the moon. Again, we want safety on the street. There also may be the opportunity for some federal transportation grants. Under Pete Buttigieg, there's grants available. I know Mr. Lay is looking into that possibility. So there may be a way to get some reimbursement for the improvements from the city. So the developer, again, we were trying to find creative solutions. We have not been able to come together between the council, the developer, and residents up until now with any solutions. So that's why we took the liberty. I hope we didn't offend you by saying we want the city to pay half and the developer pay half, but that's kind of where it came from. Our goal is to get a safe street and to make people slow down and to stop the cut-through traffic. And so this was a way we thought we could do that. And the developer and the residents were able to reach an agreement that we hope you will also approve. So again, there is a cap, at least in the proposal that I put forward, the stipulation D. In stipulation E, there is no cap, and that was from the city staff. That the stipulation E is where the developer says he'll contribute $100,000. And then there is no cap in that stipulation, but in D there is. I know this is really tough. There's a lot of work that everyone does, and I do appreciate that. And the developer and the residents worked very hard together, so thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
Ms. Rubin, and thank you for being part of that resident group that met with the developer. Skip Quimby.
Good evening, Skip Quimby, 13287 High Drive. I live across the street from Larry Ganja. So I also stand on my front porch and look south at the property where this development may or may not rise from the earth. Doing the right thing is the same thing as doing the smart thing. I don't envy you folks at all, and I don't envy Mr. Odo either. You guys are, I'm not familiar with these processes. Are they always this confusing and kiboshed? Or have the appearance of? Because that's the way this whole thing appears to me, and I don't envy those of you who have to sort through this and figure it out. Mr. Odo has been very successful, it appears to me, building rental properties surrounded by existing commercial services and amenities. And it just seems to me that maybe this one, he wasn't prepared to build the project that he proposed in a spot that's so important in Leawood. And so important to surrounding neighbors like myself, and now certainly to the council. I don't know that he was prepared, because it all seems pretty confused. The proposal in its many iterations seems confusing to me. Their presentations seem confusing to me. His team seems confusing to me. They've changed course midstream, substantially revising the project's approved plan for whatever reason. We've all seen it. We've all heard it. When I say we all, I mean the members of this council and the residents of 5 developments, more than 2,000 citizens of Leawood who signed petition objecting to this development, who banded together to speak the language of reason and truth and resistance to a project we believe has been really wrong from the start. We all know where we stand today is not right for Leawood. It's not right for Leawood. So as you sit on the cusp of maybe approving this project to move forward, and I mean not just phase 1 and phase 2, but when you say yes, here we go. And it's the whole deal. And we all know it. That's what you're dealing with. So again, I say doing the right thing is doing the smart thing. Same as. You have to hold Mr. Odo to the strictures of the LDO, the truth of it, not their interpretation of it, the truth of it. To do otherwise would set a precedent, and you've all started to talk about precedent, and I haven't heard the word precedent before tonight. But it exists. It would set a precedent for the future of what we're going to call mixed use in our city, our entire city. So when the next developer comes along in Ward 1 or Ward 2 or Ward 4 with a plan that gets approved by the Planning Commission, despite the objections of surrounding residents, and then changes are made to that plan, substantial changes, where will that leave the occupiers of your seats then, and the enforceability of the Leawood Development Ordinance? What role will the president of East Village play? No, I don't envy you. You're in a tough spot. Unfortunately, it's one of your own making. But you have the power and the opportunity to make sure that Mr. Odo does the right thing because you did the right thing. And if Mr. Odo can't do that and has to walk away, well, would that be such a bad thing? Make it his choice. Because doing the right thing is the same as doing the smart thing for everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Quimby. Gareth Matthews.
Good evening. Gareth Matthews at 13241 High Drive in Leawood. I have a prepared remark, but I also wanted to just answer at least a couple of the questions that were asked before. Mr. Rawlings, you asked if Scott Lambers had ever told us that there would not be a benefit district put in place for the High Drive, 132nd Street. I do not remember specifically him using the words benefit district. I do remember specifically both he and David Lay sending emails in which Scott Lambers was copied that indicated that residents would not be asked to pay. And I believe it had nothing to do with the $200,000 versus $25,000 you alluded to. He believed there was an agreement between the developer and the city, and that was one of the things that came out of that meeting after December 6, 2021, was Scott Lambers came up and said, let me go back with my staff to meet with the developer and see if there's something we can do. The residents tried it. It didn't work. Just leave us alone in a room. The residents were not involved. We were not invited. We were specifically excluded. And whatever agreement came out that was represented to the governing body in Mark Klein's letter is what you all voted on. Subsequent to that, Scott Lambers, Mark Klein, David Lay, all in communications with us indicated that that agreement was in place. And so that's why he made it clear that, and we even asked the question, are we going to be asked to be paying for this? And he said no. Again, I don't remember if it was he or David Lay, but I sent an email at the end of December this past year that outlined that entire history, so it's still in the packet, and I just wanted to make that part clear. In terms of why there was an agreement, why there was a compromise about 50-50 with the city, it came down to this impossible dilemma that we as residents have had, that we had assurances from the city that $200,000 was there to be used for traffic calming on that street. Again, we were not in the room. We relied on what the city said. Mr. Odo, on the other hand, said, no, that was a misunderstanding. That agreement did not exist. And the citizens were caught in the middle. What we saw thereafter, starting in October of last year, was the stipulations coming from Patty Bennett to you all started to introduce $30,000. And then it was using existing traffic calming policies. That had, again, Mr. Lambert said, this is not about existing policy. Existing policy is looking at existing problems. This is not what that's about. This is about getting ahead of the development. So I just want to make that clear why we said we don't know what happened in that room, but let the city and the developer figure it out. And if you're not comfortable with 50-50, that's up to you. But we can't force the developer to do something that was a condition agreed to with the city or not, depending on who you hear. We are the last people who are in a position to tell you what happened in that room. But we do know the guarantees that were made to us by the city. And that was the thinking in terms of passing it back to the city. In terms of the berms, there has been an awful lot of discussion about the berms going back and forth. And I wish I had a tenth the time that the other side has had to explain what has happened. A lot has happened. At 5:28, I believe it was, or 5:48, the most recent version of the stipulation came out. I didn't see it until it came up on the board there. There's 5 representatives. We need to talk to each other because we're representing people. We're not empowered to just one of us say, yeah, that's right. I would say there are portions of that I'm not in love with. But the biggest issue is the berms, we believe, were there to provide partial screening of what lays behind them. I'm not aware of any of the cases. That was just something that never was addressed as part of this. We talked about it. It just never came up. They said it cannot be done because of drainage issues. And so that's it. So we have a discussion of berms and a stipulation on berms, but the berms are intended to serve a purpose. That's why they're all there. Landscaping berms serve a purpose as partial screening of what sits behind, and instead what we have are buildings sitting above the tops of the berms. So there is no screening. So I just want to make that clear. I think the final point I want to make is the prepared remarks that I have. At virtually every meeting I have attended, I have told you how disappointed my neighbors are about this plan. It's not mixed use. The West development is 98% residential. There are no attractions to draw in people from the outside. But Mr. Holland told us on February 6th that ship has sailed. The preliminary plan locked down those details and are beyond our reach. And in our first resident meeting with Diane Stoddard and Mark Klein last month, they confirmed the fact and made it clear to the representatives of the residents that we cannot force changes to the preliminary plan. We can't get reduced densities, we can't get more retail, we can't get improved attractions. The vote the governing body took on January 3rd, 2022, approved a plan that we cannot change. But the same Leawood development ordinance that prevents residents in the city from opening up the preliminary plan to change also applies to the developer. He cannot make changes that change intent, nor can he make changes that go beyond minor adjustments. LDO section 16-3-13, section C, and 16-3-13D6 make that clear. The LDO says that a substantial change to or from a preliminary plan shall mean any change to a structure or any other change not identified as a minor change, or any change that is materially contrary to the intent of the approved preliminary plan. In other words, if it's not a minor change, it's a substantial change. The architectural design changes since preliminary plan approval changed a significant intent that was outlined in the staff report on February 6th governing body meeting. Phase 2 includes 26 mansion-style apartment buildings and had a traditional look that, according to the city, provided a distinct sense of place in the development and linked that portion of the development to the architectural style of nearby neighborhoods to the north. Now, with the changes Odo Development has made to those buildings, what you're seeing are the words compatibility and cohesiveness with other phases of the development rather than the intent of creating a distinct sense of place in that same development and tying it to nearby neighborhoods. Section 16.3.16D and D6 also make it clear that changes made to the mansion-style apartments, whether with a flat roof or a pitched roof made of asphalt shingles, represent a substantial change from the preliminary plan. In fact, Even if the roof remained unchanged, the design has been reworked and includes details that go far beyond what the LDO considers to be a minor appearance change. The LDO says that a substantial change is any change not identified as a minor change, and it makes clear what sort of building appearance changes are considered minor. It provides examples of minor changes such as external fixtures, trash enclosures, exterior colors, or awnings. It does not say that you can change all of these things. It uses the word or, not and. But just by looking at the design changes of the 26 mansion-style buildings, you can see that the changes go well beyond a change in color or awning or external fixtures such as doorknobs or lighting fixtures. The changes have been made to create a more modern aesthetic that the developer says is more in demand, more in keeping with mixed-use developments in the area, and provide greater cohesiveness within the development. Those changes represent a substantial change, and the development must be returned to the Planning Department for a public hearing as a result. The LDO does not care why a substantial change has occurred. It only cares that one has occurred, and there is no other remedy for such a change but to send it to a new preliminary plan. If you don't get this right, you will have undermined the LDO in a way that you can never repair. Every developer from here on out will be able to change their plans after preliminary and even after final without the city being able to stop them. So this matters, and I hope that you'll get it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews, and thank you for your participation with the resident group as well. All right, that concludes our citizens who've signed in to speak, so I'd like to offer an opportunity for the development team to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Curtis Holland again. Appreciate you giving me a few minutes here. Appreciate everybody's input. It was great to hear everybody and understand what those their comments were. They're not new. We've been hearing them for a long time. I agree with much of what was said. The representative from the Enclave, that we need to follow the approved preliminary development plan. Well, I agree with that. That's what your code says. And I would submit to you that we are. I hear some comments most recently. The gentleman said that we have all these substantial changes, but then doesn't name any of the substantial changes. I got a clue from Mr. Matthews just a second ago as what he thinks is a substantial change, and that is architecture or design of the mansions. But again, that's not a change. A change suggests that there was an approval first, and then we changed it. And I would take you back to the approved preliminary development plan, and specifically stipulation number 14, saying building elevations are not approved with this preliminary plan. All buildings within this development shall conform to the architectural type, style, and scale of buildings approved by the governing body at final plan. And that's where we are. We don't have a change. Can't have a change, much less a substantial change, when nothing was approved in the first place. You can't rely on the one picture of the Villa Milano where we said, hey, this is the layout and the look of what a mansion-style building is, and then hold us to that very specific, precise example as a reason to say, well, you didn't do that, it's a substantial change. That's not the way it works. I appreciate there's some confusion about how the process works, but there shouldn't be any confusion. I'd like to know when this board or the city has denied a final plan that's in substantial compliance with the preliminary development plan. Okay? We'd like to know what that is. That's not what your ordinance says. The ordinance is very clear, and I'm not going to go through section 16, this and that, and try to make an argument based on the precise language of the UDO. We know what those are, the LDO. We know what it is. And you know what it is, too. And we are in compliance with the approved preliminary development plan. We agree, hold us to that standard, but don't hold us to a different standard, which is what seems to be being suggested here. Having said all that, we do appreciate their input. We thank you for the opportunity to sit down and meet with them. We have come substantially far to getting to meeting them on literally everything. And now we want to hold out and say the design of the mansions is a change, and therefore it's substantial as a door to get us back to the rezoning and approved preliminary development plan. We spent 2 years doing that and a year doing this, and now we're going to go do that for 3 more years. That's what you're looking at. All we're asking is for you to approve phase 1 and phase 2 that is 100% compliant with the approved preliminary development plan. And if it's not, I'd like to hear the reasons why. You've already heard from your planning director and your city attorney on the record saying they are in substantial compliance, and we agree with them. Your planning commission has recommended approval of these applications twice now. So we would ask you to consider the changes we did make, the newer compromises, and what we've done here, and do the right and just thing and approve these applications. And we thank you for your time.
Mr. Holland, before you step away, I think Mr. Gunja brought up a question about pitched or gabled. Both words were used. So
I'll let the architect
Mr.
speak to
Clover
that.
can probably answer. Thank you.
It's primarily gable and hip roofs. A gable is like this. A hip is when you see you're basically all around, and they're all pitched roofs.
So gabled and pitched are one and the same, you're saying?
You can
They're
use a
both
term to say
pitched.
it's a pitched roof, but it's basically primarily using gable, which is where you're looking at the end like this. Let the record show the architect is holding his hands in a V. And then the hip roof is the basically where it's the same slope on all sides, and it's a combination of those. And a pitched roof, I mean, for example, on the flat roof style, there's a pitched roof on there too because we use it to embellish and enhance the edge. But a hip roof and a gable roof is a pitched roof. It's
But
a pitch.
the depictions that you showed in your elevations
Is what we intend to do.
is what you intend to do.
Yes.
So I think
Yes, ma'am.
that's the thing to point out. Okay.
Yes, and obviously we'll have a full set of CDs and the staff will get to review it.
Okay.
And it is your choice of, I mean, obviously we want to do the hip or the pitched roof, the gable roof on the twin villas. But I think the other decision is, do you wish for us to make the buildings taller and have the less solar on the mansion styles that are closer to 135th Street? So
Well,
that would be the
every
one question we'd
email-
like you to ask. So.
Every email I've received has requested the pitched roof. I haven't had anyone's, well, there might be one or two, but by far the majority want the pitched.
And we're
or
happy
gable.
either way.
Okay, thank you. There might be more questions for you now that I open it up to this group again.
I had one.
Mr. Sipple?
I don't know if it's for the architect or for the attorney or for the developer, but out of the, what is it, about 405, how many units, how many residential units are going to be in the whole development?
With this approval?
Yeah, with phase 1 and phase 2.
Oh,
Phase 1, phase 2.
408.
108?
408.
408. And will all of those be pitched roof? Except for the brownstones. And how many out of the 408 would that be? 200?
No, it's 2 buildings.
And how many units?
I think one's got 20.
No, he meant how many would not be
How many-
pitched?
21. Units.
Units.
2 buildings. 2 buildings that have 21 units in it.
Okay,
Will
so
not
that's
be pitched.
42?
No.
21,
Total.
okay.
2 buildings. I don't know.
So the preponderance of what we're talking about is going to be all pitched roofs.
Right.
And that's what the neighbors to the north would see, pitched roofs.
Correct. They'll see they'll see the twin villas and the single family.
Right.
I doubt they'll see too much of the single family
Okay.
apartments.
That clarifies it. Thank you very much.
Ms. Larson and Ms. Phillip.
Okay. First of all, I do want to thank everyone, including the developer, the citizen input. It's been very beneficial. I think these plans are improved from where they were. And I appreciate all the effort that has gone into that. I do want to answer Mr. Holland's question, when has the city denied a final plan based on this? And the answer is no, because as we talked about in the last meeting, and Mark Klein verified, we've never had final plans changed this dramatically between preliminary and final. And I know we have a difference of opinion, and I respect your opinion, and I hope that you will respect mine. But that's where we are, and I think that this decision is very important, as we've had two people mention, and I had in my notes the word precedent, that we need to really think about what precedent we are setting when we're looking at the final plans from what has been approved at preliminary. And my main hang-up is on the mansion-style architectural change. It is my opinion that the changes in architecture from the preliminary plan to the final constitute a substantial change as defined by our LDO. And I'm not on board with changing to get the pitch roofs, we have to change our LDO to allow the composite or asphalt shingles. We haven't discussed that yet, but I'm not on board on making that change to our LDO. We pride ourselves on distinction, and having those more cumbersome and expensive roofing requirements is what helps makes us distinctive. And I'm not on board on changing that at this time. I'm open to discussion on it at a later date. I do want to mention the LDO section 16.3.13 section C, that substantial changes are basically not identified as minor, and any change that is materially contrary to the intent of the approved preliminary development plan. And in my humble opinion, the dramatic changes to the architecture in the mansion-style structures is a substantial change. Those material changes include the overall style to a contemporary and more modern style, the flat roofs, which are highly visible, and there are so many of the mansion-style homes, is by far our biggest phase. I don't know what percentage it occupies of the land, but it's the biggest, which also factors into my personal equation. The exterior building materials are different. I like the chimney. No, there's no fireplace. I'm okay. Window shapes, garage doors. It's a lot of changes, and and I know that we have staff that have said that they have a different opinion about substantial changes. But I do want to go back to a planning commission hearing where Ricky Sanchez, our Leawood staff, said, and I quote, staff sees it as a drastic change in architecture from what was originally proposed. The other architecture with the sloped roofs and the traditional style would create a sense of place in the development, and it would connect to the other neighborhoods, especially the one to the north. And I quoted Mark Klein at our last meeting, but I do think it's worth reiterating our director of planning that he says the preliminary elevations showed buildings with sloped roofs and a more traditional residential architectural style that more closely matches the surrounding single-family neighborhood. We know the rest of what he said. Staff recommends the elevations of the 12 to 14 unit apartment buildings be revised to more match what was previously shown at the time of the preliminary plan, as it creates a sense of place and helps connect the proposed development to the adjacent neighborhoods. This is a super important decision. It's going to affect a lot of people. I wish we could walk out of this room with a win-win, and that's what I was hoping for when this matter was continued for the discussion this evening. But we weren't able to achieve that. My final comment for now is I'm still hung up on the 5-foot sidewalks. This is part of our 135th Street community plan. And at the time of the preliminary plan, the developer agreed to the stipulation stating that those design standards with the different street types and the sidewalk requirements would be adhered to. So those are my comments for now. I think we've covered berms, we've covered traffic calming, but those are my thoughts at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Phillip.
I would just ask to the point about the 5-foot sidewalks. I know there was discussion about why you wanted the variance. If you might share that again.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity for that. I'm going to try going back up to the site plan. And I hope I can blow this up. This isn't an MXD zoning, and part of an MXD zoning states that and I'm going to slaughter the words, but the intent is MXD zoning is to push the buildings as close to the streets as possible. That's what we do. When we do this, we are the buildings. The front of the buildings up here are sometimes as close as what? 10 or 12 feet. 10 or 12 feet away from the back of curb. When they're 10 or 12 feet and you get a 5 to 6 foot landscaping bed, and then you put a 6 foot sidewalk in, there's literally no grass. We think it just is too much grass. This is very much a residential community. And if you've been to any of our stuff, these are very much residential. And that's why the Planning Commission 100% voted in favor of whatever they do. They said, make these sidewalks 5 feet because they do want to have a little grass there. They do want to have a little bit of more of a green space there instead of concrete. There's absolutely no need with the super low density over here of these apartments that they're going to need 6 foot on both sides of the street. This is why they wanted, and they agreed 5 foot would be adequate. And once again, if you're setting buildings back, 100 feet, 30 feet even, you might have room. But when you're only setting them back 12 feet, and that's what you do in an MXD, you put them right up on front, there's no real room for a sidewalk. So we want to make that as small as possible. In most communities, we don't even have the sidewalks, and if we do, we only have it on one side.
But on each side of High, it's 6 feet.
On High Drive, because we agreed that would be high traffic, and we would consider that. Or not consider it, we proposed that. Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to...
And we will also have the trails would be much wider as well. It's going to be 8 feet, 10 feet? 10 feet.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. One other comment I wanted to make was that City Administrator Diane Stouter's suggestion for the language of the $200,000 letter of credit with a limit of only $100,000 if the draw was higher than that, not specifying the city's involvement, I think allows us to go through the continuation of the planning process, or the processes going on with Public Works, and keeps that door open for funding, and when you're making a request for funding, you need to show that you still need funds. And if we word it any other way, there would be no reason to go get grants. So I'd like to leave it open-ended the way our city administrator suggested it, if we're going to move forward with some language. And I do appreciate everyone's efforts and the long nights. You know, you're having about as much fun as we are staying up till 11 and midnight. So I thank you guys. It makes it better. It really does. And the last comment I would make is that I would like to have everything that's not facing in the Twin Villas, but everything else would have the flat roofs to allow for solar in the future. It's not going to be visible to the residents. And I think that potential for 100% solar is something worth keeping in the conversation going forward.
Ms. Harrison?
Thank you. There are three reasons why I feel like I can't support this project at this time. Mr. Odo just mentioned the mixed-use zoning, and I just don't feel like this looks like mixed use. I feel like this is, well, it is 100% residential. What we're looking at tonight, phases 1 and 2, 100% residential, 0% retail and commercial. Someday, there's going to be a little bit of retail over there at 134th and Pawnee, but right now, for the next several years, this is 100% residential, so we should just call it that. So the mixed-use rules shouldn't apply. I'm concerned that this barely passed the Planning Commission and the governing body on multiple occasions. If you look at the minutes for the meetings, not all of our planning commissioners were in attendance at the first meeting when Mr. Elkins, Chair Elkins, broke the tie. People who were not there that day later on voted against this at different levels. That concerns me, and that it was a tie at this level. That just concerns me that there is not overwhelming support for so many reasons. In the very first video or presentation we saw, we heard that this place, you sold us on this sense of place for all of Leawood, a community space where everybody in Leawood would be welcoming and would be flocking. I remember car shows being mentioned and art fairs being mentioned. At this point in time, I see zero reasons for a non-resident of East Village to come into this space. Someday, like I said a minute ago, maybe some shopping over there at Pawnee and 134th, but I just don't see this as mixed use, and I don't see it for a place. And in fact, I was surprised to hear tonight that Mr. Odo hasn't secured the land that this retail space, this little bit of retail space would actually be on. So right now, as of right now, he doesn't own the land to build the retail space, which would make it a mixed use. These are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hazeltine?
Thank you, Mayor. You know, we've talked a lot about whether or not this is mixed use or not. And I can tell you from my time on the Planning Commission and my time on this body, and which is about 20 years, when you pass a preliminary, you change the zoning. And we changed the zoning to mixed use. So by our own definition, this is mixed use. And there's been a lot of talk about the whole issue of the final matching up with the preliminary. And I guess maybe I kind of started that, but there's been a lot of things said. And, you know, the LDO is law. And when it comes to law, I take my legal advice from attorneys, always have, and preferably specialized attorneys. Like Ms. Bennett, our legal advisor. And this section 16.313C, which defines substantial changes, has already been quoted twice, so I'm not going to quote it again, but I will say, you know, it's been argued that changes to architectural detail and screening are both substantial changes. However, the LDO makes it clear that these are the types of details to be shown and approved at final. Pursuant to the preliminary plan stipulation, elevations were not yet approved, and under the LDO, our law, elevation detail is not due until final approval. And that is the section right before, the one that was quoted, 16-3-12B. Likewise, finished grade and contour setback sidewalks landscaping are specifically intended to be submitted at final. So, this isn't my first rodeo, and as far as I'm concerned, and we've gone over this a million times, but it does comply. And as far as I'm concerned, we're legally compelled to pass this. So that's, like it or not. And I don't get to define what substantial change is, and nobody else does either, but the LDO does. And I rely on our legal counsel and our planning director, who's an expert as well, to tell me whether or not it does constitute substantial change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Ms. King.
Thank you. This isn't my first rodeo either. I do agree with Councilwoman Larson that under the way this is written, that this change is material contrary to the intent of the approved preliminary development plan. I understand what Mr. Azeltine is saying, and I understand the process that the elevations do not come until final, landscaping doesn't come till final, but I also understand, as was just mentioned, that the plans passed by the barest of margins. And when the preliminary was before us with the initial photos and the initial dialogue, we had, you all saw, we had a 4-4 vote. And the mayor broke the tie, which is her charge. When there's a 4-4 vote, she said, and I believe her exact words were, I don't know that she used the word reluctantly, but she said she feels compelled, whatever the word was, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, to vote in favor of the development. But she also said that, and I believe this was a quote, that we need to hold the developers' feet to the fire. I believe that was her quote, and I could be mistaken, but I do believe that was your quote. Well, so that I do believe is our charge right now, is and I believe in it strongly, as do the rest of my council, one way or the other. We don't always agree, clearly. We pride ourselves on not being a Stepford council. We don't all agree. We don't all have the same background, which is good. When you have a council, you're not supposed to, all be Stepford council people, for lack of a better term. But we were a split vote. And mayor broke the tie, and mayor said we need to hold the feet to the fire. So that is what I believe is happening right now. I believe, I still think we need a cap on the traffic calming up to the 200,000. I appreciated and Ms. Rubin is correct. Her rendition said there was a cap of 200,000. So that actually makes me feel better. It wasn't in the one that the staff came back with, but it looks like we can get there on that. The berms, Mr. Matthews said it himself, that they were firing back and forth at 5:25 today. I'm not sure that the residents agree or understand where we are at the berms, because we were getting emails also. I was talking to Mr. Lay almost till 5 o'clock myself, and as we were talking, here come the emails. Some of these red line stipulations weren't to us until after 5 today. We've talked about it 100 times that We don't want to legislate nor create at the I don't know what the word is, dais. I've heard it said four different or three different vowels tonight. So dais, that we don't like to do that. We've all said that many times. And that's what I think we're being forced to do. I don't think there's agreement with the homeowners yet on the berms. I think we're getting there for sure, but I don't know that we've had the time because it just kept changing. I personally believe that the only people that have some leeway with the substantial change argument is not necessarily staff. It's not the Planning Commission. Theirs is again black and white, where we are the only body that can have gray. And this councilwoman thinks that we have substantial changes here. I believe that with all my heart, and that's the way I'll be voting. I don't like the idea. Mr. Odo said if we do the pitched roofs, then he wants to put on asphalt shingles, and he wants the gutters to not have to be interior. Those are LDO changes, if I'm not missing something. If we allow, and I could be wrong here, but if we allow, as it's written, for those mansion style, 26 of them, to have the pitch roofs, but we change the material and we change the gutters, I believe that's an LDO change.
Actually, the roofing would be an LDO change. However, the internalizing the gutters is not part of the Leawood Development Ordinance.
Okay, thank you. So allowing he's allowing the pitched roof, but the material is an LDO change. So we would have to agree to an LDO change on 26 buildings. And I bring up Meadowbrook, I bring up Park Place, I bring up any large, dense development around us that is relatively recent. When you have the little pictures, and I won't flash one in front of me, but you have a little picture, and here's all the little buildings, and here's the bigger buildings, and here's the even bigger buildings, and it's an 8.5 by 11, and here's all these little boxes. It's impossible for all of us, and probably all of you, unless you're a super duper architect like Mr. Clover, perhaps, or the development team, to understand the magnitude of the density, and it's impossible for me. Let me speak for myself. It's impossible for me. But you just see little drawings and a little piece of paper, and it's happening even in Meadowbrook. All of a sudden, they're having million-plus villas, and they all of a sudden, on paper, it looks fine, but then they're built, right? And the backyard is 15 feet to a fence, and then the other guy over here is $1 million villa, and it's 15 feet to the. And again, until it's there, it's almost next to impossible to visualize the density. So these are just observations that I'm making, but for those reasons and others that I've said all along, I don't believe we're there yet. I love the dialogue. I love the working. I think we're getting there, and I do believe strongly that is our charge, to get there in the end. With all due respect to all the people and the opinions that have been flying around tonight and previously. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Osmond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to be short, or try to be as short as possible. I know that's difficult in certain aspects for me. Before I go off on to my diatribe here, I've told the residents, I've told everyone here, and we all say this over and over, the process is something in which we read every single email, we get back to the constituents, we want to make sure that you are heard, and we attempt to bridge that gap. It may not be perfect. One of the most difficult things for City Council is determine not only what's best for the residents, but what's best for the community as a whole. And if you go to any city, as a layperson resident, you don't know how the process goes. The people that know are either the City Council and staff, or developers, architects, contractors that routinely come before the City Council. be it Kansas City, Lawrence, Leawood. And there is a lot of verbiage. And even after 5, 10, 15 years on council, we still don't know all the answers. We're all going back and forth. And so we rely on comments. We rely on that feedback. And I think a year and a half ago, I said, hey, I understand, but I want to kick this back. Not once, I kicked it back twice. The third time was Mr. Rawlings, because we wanted to see that give and take. And it's almost, I don't want to use the analogy of sports, but it's the agent on one side, it's the owner on the other trying to get some sort of deal. Sometimes it happens, and sometimes it doesn't. Deals come at the 11th hour, 59th minute. There was a case in Deborah's and my ward where we were literally going back and forth, and then the HOA decided at the last second, a day or two before, that yes, this meets all the criteria, we're signing off on everything. And that was the objective by getting staff, the citizens, the developer together over the past month. Before I say anything, I just want to address something that we read every email, but disturbed me very greatly, and that is the assumption of impropriety, the assumption that we have kickbacks, the assumption that there is no right for the mayor, and Mayor, I'm sorry, but you have a livelihood. Your family has a livelihood. And if there's an
My family's company is not building this development.
Nor do they do residential.
Right. Well, I mean, there's been accusations that they're the contractor, and that is not
correct.
true. Yeah.
And in instances that have happened, you have recused yourself. You have gone outside, and someone else has run that meeting. And by that theory, Ms. Kane, you should be off too, because you're a residential person. And in some future point, if you represent someone that may go to Odo's development and purchase a house, you in effect are having a kickback because of that. Me doing commercial real estate, if in the future I have someone that may or may not go to Leawood, which I do not have people go to Leawood, but if I represent my client, I need to do the best for my client and for the city. So for those residents that say there's kickbacks, follow the money, that's patently, categorically false. That being said, let's go on to my comments, which are, I felt that there were 3 or 4 major things that the residents had sticking points on, and we've looked at it throughout the past couple months. I have my viewpoint as a person on the diocese.
I know, right?
Deus.
And in terms of LDO and the way I'm going to vote is based off of my own interpretation, and the residents should respect that. And you have your opinion, everyone has their own. But at the end of the day, if it goes, the mayor has the right to decide, because this is like a Supreme Court. This is like the state where there are close ties sometimes. And at the end of the day, we have to be able to move forward. I want to go to Ms. Rubin's suggestion on the $200,000, which is, my concern is, in our district, we had residents that paid their money in advance for speed tables on 85th Street, 85th Terrace. We had no control over Chick-fil-A, Trader Joe's, Target, which is on the Missouri side, but there was a significant impact, and we had to figure out how to narrow the roads. We don't want to be a city of speed tables. I do like that cap of $200,000, but the suggestion with staff is basically saying the developer kicks in the first $100,000 irrespective, and then after that, there's a line of credit, or the city. That's different than splitting it 50-50, where if it's 50 or 100,000, it would be split 50-50. So I just want to make that two distinctions, which is a cap and a dollar figure for the city and a dollar figure for the developer. That's all I have right now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sipple.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the spirit of being open about what has gone on in the last 30 or 60 days, I've had extensive discussions with Rick Robinson, Rick Odo, Rachel Rubin, Gareth Matthews, and Rob Groves over the phone, sometimes in person. I always speak as one council member, not a consensus. I just give advice. If I were in their shoes, what would I do? And the other thing is, I want to take a little bit of credit for Mr. Rawlings' idea of remanding this to the city administrator. I seconded that motion. So. But I really am, I'm very pleased with the outcome of those 3 meetings. I know for those of you that were in those meetings, it might have been painful, it might have been expensive, but it really accomplished what at least this councilman wanted to have done, which is come to the table with a willingness to compromise, meet a little bit, move towards the middle. And what we've heard tonight, whether it's on the berms or the traffic calming or the pitched roofs or the trail around the church property, there has been compromise. There's been a lot of movement towards the middle, and I think more people are happy with the results of that 30-day hiatus to meet with the city administrator. I think it was a mission accomplished motion, an effort on your part, and thank you very much for doing that. Where I am, I'm more excited about this development now than I was before because we've met in the middle. People got, when we got into this thing a year ago, the main complaints were that there was a problem with the berms, there was a problem with the pitched roofs, there was a problem with the traffic calming. I think those have at least been addressed, and we're very, very close to coming to agreement. What I'm a little bit uncomfortable is right now tonight is I'd like to really get those things documented for everyone to see what is the exact way we're going to go about measuring the berms, installing the berms, and coming back after the dirt has been moved. Is everybody in agreement with what we're going to do there? Is everybody in agreement with the process that Ms. Kane and the Public Works Committee and David are going to go through to survey the neighbors, to come up with options, to talk about maybe putting temporary test options in for traffic calming and doing that stuff? Is that going to satisfy everybody? And then, pitched roofs. What buildings are going to have pitched roofs? Have pictures of what those buildings look like, and let everybody generally agree on if I'm on 132nd Street at the corner of 133rd and High Drive, what will I see? Will I see pitched roofs or flat roofs and so forth? So I'm a little concerned on moving forward tonight until everybody sees the document as to what the deal was. So I guess I'm in the middle. This is very hard for me because I know there's 1,000 people out there that would hate my guts if I had voted yes. But I think that we're very, very close. And I would like to see the compromised memorialized and have everybody in agreement. And I would like to see us come together at the next meeting or the meeting after that and vote up or down with everybody is in agreement what the terms are. I know we've had proposals on what the stipulations are, but I don't know if everyone in this room is agreement with what stipulation we're really going with. At least I'm not. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Got Ms. Fillon or Mr. Azerton. I wasn't sure which hand went up first.
I don't care. Go ahead.
I'd like to propose that we move ahead with a motion to approve.
No, actually, I have some. In regard to what Councilmember Sibyl just said, our staff has been working extremely hard in the last 30 days to pull this thing together. And at the very opening of this meeting, Ms. Stoddard, our city administrator, referenced Exhibit A, which is basically a distillation and a compilation of all of the compromise and the discussions that have taken place. And so I don't agree that we can't move forward. I think we can and we should, because as Councilmember Osmond kind of touched upon a few minutes ago, we're kind of like the Supreme Court, right? This is a quasi-judicial body. This is a quasi-judicial process. And in a court of law, which this is not, it's kind of a quasi-court of law, both parties have rights. And we don't want to lose sight of that. I mean, we do, sure, we represent, the people, but because of the type of body this is, we have to be very mindful of the rights of the developer. And this thing's been going on for 3 years. And we've hashed and rehashed this thing quite a few times. And I feel it's very important for us to move forward. So, for what it's worth.
Ms. Phillip.
And I couldn't agree more with the thought process that our staff is not only been a part of coming up with the answers and working with both the developer and the citizens, but they know how to execute. They're going to understand how to make sure we're compliant on stormwater and drains, and we do a landscaping check on everything we approve on an annual basis. So I think there's plenty of checks and balances within our city staff's procedures and their integrity to get the job done right. So I would, and I'll probably need a little bit of refinement as I go through this, but I want to go with the suggested wording from our city administrator to move to approve the governing body, the Planning Commission's recommendation of approval of case number 85-22, East Village, with stipulations 1 through 40, and additional stipulations A, B, and C, which are all of the solar stipulations. E, which is the open letter of credit, with the only addition being that the project recommendation of the Public Works not to exceed $200,000 in its total recommendation for traffic calming. And the reason I wanted to put that not to exceed, that was asked for, but the reason I want to leave it open is because we want to go after the funding that we talked about for grants, and this gives us a reason to do it because we still need to generate additional funds. But I think that we all understand the city is going to stand by this project. Then the next stipulation would be in this memo, and I'll read the stipulation for prior to issuance of any building permit, developer shall provide $200,000 of letter of credit to the city to be drawn on for the purpose of installing traffic calming measures in accordance with the general procedure set forth in the city's traffic calming policy in the vicinity of 132nd Street and High Drive, quote-unquote, traffic calming improvements approved by the governing body after amount $100,000 is drawn from such letter of credit, and the project not to exceed $200,000. For the next one is going to be the berms, which would be the please don't ever use this turquoise background again, please. It would be F, which is reading the proposed berm on the south side of 103rd Street shall be designed and constructed at the same elevation or higher than the existing berm on the north side of 133rd, with the following exceptions: cross sections, lot 26, Twin Villa 1, Twin Villa 2, proposed roadway intersection.
I think actually G was what was suggested, the one under that.
Thank you.
I think.
Yes,
That was
G, that's
what
correct.
Dave-
Yeah,
Okay.
F was Friday.
Yeah, so if you could read further down, Ms.
Okay.
Fella.
All righty, because it wasn't, G isn't even on the page.
G's
Right here.
right here.
I
It's
know,
another
but it isn't in
turquoise.
her motion. It was F or H.
Well,
Okay, so.
Ms. Stoddard is still here. Ms.
No, no,
Stoddard,
you're
are we
you're
correct?
right.
The G is where we accidentally left, and I'm going to take credit for not knowing my alphabet as well as I should. I'm the one that dropped the G.
Oh,
Okay.
all right. Thank you.
So for the berms, the proposed berm on the south side of 133rd Street shall be designed and constructed in substantial compliance with the elevations provided in the approved final plan. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the developer shall provide an as-built grading survey of the 103rd Street berm in the same locations as the cross-sections submitted by Schlegel on March 2nd, 2023. All as-built elevations shall substantially comply with the berm elevation shown on said cross-sections within 4 inches prior to issuance of a temporary certificate of occupancies. So a lot of this how-to is in these amendments. And then the last one to be included is if the city amends its development ordinance to allow composition roof shingles on a multi-family building, then the twin villas and the mansion-style apartments shall be constructed with the materials and colors documented in the record with pitched roofs and shall be otherwise substantially similar to those elevations shown and included in the record of the governing body meeting. If such an LDO amendment is denied, then the developer shall submit a revised final plan solely for approval of alternate elevations.
Second.
Point of order, or whatever the words are. You talked about with the traffic calming, you talked about the $200,000 cap. You did not reference that the first $100,000 was the developer's responsibility.
I agree with that. That should.
Did I not
will
read it?
accept the friendly amendment if Ms. Filla will.
Yeah, I'm sorry, did I not read that correctly?
I
It
thought
wasn't
it
in
was,
there.
The
I
developer
thought
will
you
be in-
talked about the 100,000.
The developer will be reimbursed any amount over $100,000 drawn from such line of
That-
credit.
Well, that sentence ought to be removed. The developer will be, because the developer has now agreed to
Pay the first 100,000.
pay 100,000 toward it, assuming it costs that much.
So the credit is for, the line of credit is $200,000, and the developer will
Oh,
be
all right.
reimbursed
So it
any
is-
amount over $100,000, so that does set the limit to the
Okay.
developer at 100.
But if it clarifies it, certainly I think you could put in there developer to bear responsibility for the first 100,000, just to
To
make
make
sure
it
there's no
clearer.
question.
Okay, did you write that down? Thank you.
And also, you said not to exceed 200,000.
Not to exceed.
And
200,000.
another friendly amendment is, thank you for the clarifications on my language. But pitched roofs and shingle issue, G is X'd off, so there's I.
It's I.
It says, thank you. If the city amends its development ordinance to allow composition roof shingles, so doesn't that have to come first?
That means
The
it would have to come back with a revised final plan.
If the city does not amend the development ordinance under this stipulation, if it does amend it, then it's approved and ready to go. If it does not amend it, then the developer, the way it reads, if such an LDO amendment is denied, then the developer shall submit a revised final plan solely for approval of alternate elevations. So if the pitched roofs are
Asphalt shingles.
If the asphalt composition shingles are not allowed, then the developer may come back in with other elevations for final plan consideration.
And that will be the only thing
That would be
considered.
the only thing at that point, would be on these buildings, these particular buildings.
I'm sorry, when do we decide whether it's allowed or not allowed?
On the composition shingles, it'll be a separate LDO amendment that will come back up through the Planning Commission. It will be noticed and published like all of our other LDO amendments. They will consider and recommend to you, and then you will consider and decide.
At a future meeting?
Yes.
It could take 9 months. Could it not? Mr. Klein, I'm looking at you.
At least.
It could take a little while.
So is the motion right?
I think because we have no assurance that that LDO amendment will pass, so this is the way to word it, too.
True.
Yeah. Mr. Rawlings?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the things that's come from this bench over months, weeks and months, and many other issues is the desire to hear input from the constituents, the neighbors. That has been satisfied as far as I'm concerned. They've had the opportunity on the 4 issues to talk about what they want, and the developer has looked at those issues in phase 1 and 2. I believe this plan overall is a mixed-use plan. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. It is a mixed-use plan. It's a proposal, and it's a moving document. It's a moving plan depending on what happens in the future, and we cannot predict that, nor the developer can, or he would be. Going on retail, but again, you need rooftops. I had it on, all right. We have rooftops. So we've heard from the residents. The developer has taken those concerns into consideration and made almost every compromise that you've asked on phase 1 and 2. And so our legal department has told this councilman they are in compliance. Our planning director says they're in significant compliance. No one can tell me what a non-compliant to the LDO is. Where's that line cross? We cannot decide that today, but phase 1 and 2 is, to me, should be approved, and therefore I will be approving this amendment and this motion.
Mayor, can I
Ms. Bennett,
suggest another friendly amendment if you all are so willing? It
Yes.
was pointed out to me by Dave Lay that use my glasses here, in G, under the berm height, we have 2 different things. We have timing at building permit, and we have a timing at temporary occupancy. Both of those should read temporary occupancy. Is that right? That's correct.
So temporary certificate of occupancy.
So instead of building permit in the 3rd line, you have prior to issuance of TCO, the developer shall provide an as-built grading survey. So that would be the timing there, and it's basically the same thing as it continues on as-built berm elevation.
Housekeeping.
And that was a request by the developer, I believe, was it not? That TCO versus.
I believe that was, and I believe Mr. Lay's in agreement with that.
I accept.
Me too.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bennett.
May I ask one more question?
Yes, sure.
Patty, regarding the substantial change, there's been a ton of conversation about that tonight, and it's my understanding that certain things, there's certain things that are, again, more black and white, as I said. There's certain things like materials and FAR and numbers and that kind of thing that is very black and white. There are substantial changes or not substantial changes. But it's also my understanding that the sentence, the change in style represents a change that is materially, that's a hard word for me to say at 11 o'clock at night, contrary to the intent of the approved preliminary development plan. It is my understanding of that section of the LDO that allows the council and the council only, that any council is what I understand. Again, I'm asking for clarification from you, that is open for, it's not a black and white, it is open to some interpretation. And if the residents were brought into that room with Diane Stoddard, and the first thing that we're told is that this we can't deviate from the plan, but we're willing to discuss A, B, C, D, which we obviously were, then they were directed in a certain method that goes contrary to what I understand. Again, I could be wrong. I'm not an attorney. But what I understood, there is some latitude in the interpretation of that phrase.
There is to a certain extent, yes. If it is changing certain land uses, which I think was one of the things that was brought up, there's no latitude there. That is a substantial change. But there are two parts of that section. One is objective. One has the exact numbers and the types, and then later refers to the minor changes, which have percentages. The other is a bit more subjective, and that is and I can't say the word either, materially contrary to the intent of the preliminary plan. Yes, there are two different parts of that, one of them being more subjective.
And we as council people have the ability to take the subjective portion of that LDO and make a determination that we feel is right in our opinion.
As long as it is, justified, as long as it is not arbitrary. Yes, you do.
Then I want to state for the record once again that I do believe that the changes of the mansions were a substantial change, especially because there's 26 of them and they're large. They hold 21 people each or whatever the number was. I do believe that's a substantial change. And I do believe that the citizens were brought forth understanding that they had to come to some middle ground, and they did. They did it beautifully, and so did the developer. But that's different than us having the ability up here to be a bit more subjective with that one section of the LDO. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or discussion before we vote? I guess I want to thank the involvement of the residents once again. Someone complained that this has been going on for 3 years. And I will say it's been going on for 3 years because there have been improvements and compromises based on residents' requests and wishes. So I do think the developer moved and tried to appease and compromise what the residents wanted. And had you not been involved, we wouldn't have this plan in the appearance it is. It would have been, as someone mentioned, entirely gated, fenced, because that was the initial request, and there wouldn't have been Chadwick Park. I can think of many, even the street layout for our 135th Street community plan, the transom, is that what you call them?
The grid network and the transects.
Transects and the grid network. All of that was, actually that was our professional staff beating that drum, and then the residents' involvement really did improve it, and I like the pitched roofs much better. So again, I thank you for your involvement there. It sounds like the berms are agreeable to both sides, and certainly the landscaping is going to be substantial. I do think it's going to be basically far improved because of your involvement. So I just want to, again, thank you for that. That being said, I don't know if you're ready for the question. I mean, we've got the motion and the second on the table, and this is simply a resolution. But I think I'm going to ask for a voice vote instead of all in favor, aye, if I could.
Okay. Councilmember Rawlings?
Aye.
Councilmember Osmond?
Aye.
Councilmember Phila?
Aye.
Councilmember Larson?
Nay.
Councilmember Kane?
Nay.
Councilmember Harrison? Councilmember Asseltine?
Aye.
Councilmember Sippel.
Aye.
All right, the motion passes, and Phase 1 and 2 and the park are approved, and we will see all next phases come before this group. So you'll have opportunities to continue your involvement with the residents, and I hope you will. So thank you very much for all your work.
Respect, buddy. That was not an easy one for you, I know.
Hopefully, Jim's not going home.
Oh, that's the reason they pay us the big bucks, right?
Yep.
We still have a few things to do.
What's that?
We still have a few things.
The
to do.
meeting
do,
is
don't we?
not over.
Well, I've still got my agenda.
I hate to tell you.
I know. We'll be quick.
We're just kind of letting people,
Oh, we can just skip this,
but
can't we?
we'll probably be done by
We don't need to do this.
11.
Well, there's more on the agenda, mate.
I know. We're going on. We'll move on with the mayor's report. And I would like to just mention that I attended the Johnson-Wyandotte County's Council of Mayors March meeting. It was hosted by Lenexa Mayor Mike Boehm, and there was a great deal of discussion held on the current bills moving through the legislature that could negatively impact our local units of government. We approved a letter to be sent from our body, our council mayor's body, advocating that Senate Bill 248 be modified to allow cities to make their own determination on sales tax on food. As you recall, this was always considered eliminating the sales tax on the state's portion, but now there's a desire to eliminate our portion as well. As it stands, Leawood would lose, according to Loretta Morgan, about $1.3 million a year in sales tax revenue, as the bill is currently written. I forwarded to you all this evening, with all your other emails, the letter that the Council of Mayors sent to the chair of the Taxation Committee. So you have that in your inbox.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is this being sponsored by any House representative yet or not?
It is a Senate bill, 248.
Oh, it's a Senate bill.
It's
Okay.
a Senate bill, so it moves on to the House now, and it went to the chair of the Taxation Committee. I do believe our senator voted in favor of it. Just FYI. And I wrote a separate email myself personally as mayor of Leawood to my senator, and I would encourage you all to contact your representatives and senators as well. I think that would be a good thing.
Was there a rationale that they gave why they want to deprive us of that revenue?
It's about being less confusing to the citizens when they see their sales tax isn't zeroed out completely in 2024. This will
Oh, they
not
want to have no sales tax.
And they want to get
state
credit for
and
it.
local units.
Just for food, though, right?
Well, yes, it's food, but our three grocers are
What about a CID?
no provision to carve those out.
Wow.
That's the way it stands now. We had the lobbyist for Overland Park, Dick Carter, comes to our meetings and gave us the education on it. Second, I would say I presented an abbreviated version of my State of the City report to the Leawood Rotary Club last week, and council members Harrison, Rollins, and Sippel got to hear it all again. So
Widely acclaimed.
yes, so thank you for the invitation, Ms. Harrison. And then finally, congratulations are in order. Our Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police is having an event in Mulvane, Kansas in May, where the 2022 Silver Awards for Valor are going to be given to those involved with the fiery car rescue of our citizens. So Captain Neese of the fire department and our police corporal Mann and Officer Bacon, Hayes, Chuddick, and Richardson will be there to receive these awards, and we're just very proud of them, and thank you for sharing that great information.
Where's Mulvaney, Kansas?
Mulvane, Kansas. Is it Mulvaney or Mulvane?
Mulvane, okay.
Mulvane. I'm not sure where it is, but
Can we carpool?
It's.
oh, it's near Wichita.
It's down, it's down there. I think it's on
It's by Pratt.
Oh, by Pratt. I've been to Pratt.
Have you?
Yes, it's a long ways. It's about 5 hours. Yeah. That concludes my mayor's report. And if we go quickly, maybe we can finish by 11. Councilmember Kane, oh, wait a minute. Council members' reports. Councilmember Phillip, you've got a referral of stormwater project updates.
Yes, thank you. It's been a long time since Stormwater Committee has met. We have a new stormwater engineer on staff, and COVID is allowing us to meet in person. So this is a referral on some of the things that have not been discussed with a lot of our talented and professional volunteers. Referral to talk about stormwater project updates, residential impervious increased detention requirements, the 1/8 cent sales tax stormwater rankings, and stream assessment scope. And those are the items we'd like to refer to Stormwater Committee, because I can't wait to be on time at 7:30 in the morning as the new chair for these meetings.
Yep.
Uh-huh. So
Who's the new chair?
I am.
Oh, of course.
And I'm always late, but now I'm going to have to be on time.
You're going to
at
have to be on
7:30.
time. And these have all been discussed with David Lay.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, motion from Ms. Phyllis, second from Mr. Hazeltine.
I will be out of the country during this, I'm on this committee as well, and I will be out of the country, so I don't know
Okay.
if that matters, if quorum or whatever.
You're going to miss out.
I hate to miss it, but I want to put that
You're
out
one of
there.
4 council, but there's a whole committee
True.
of citizens,
Okay.
so I doubt that
Okay.
there'll be a quorum issue.
All right.
And I'm also on the committee and will be out of the country that same
So are you
date.
sure you don't want
Oh.
to reschedule?
That might be a good
Got your
idea.
hands full with quitters here.
Sorry, I don't travel much, but when I do.
I told you being chairman
Well,
was really
did we
hard.
set a date certain on
Well,
this?
they-
I didn't hear that in the motion.
I thought I read somewhere
The
that,
first meeting would be to discuss April 26th.
that's what I thought I read
Oh,
somewhere. Yep,
it's on the cover memo.
yep.
We'll send out an email a month ahead or so to make sure we have a quorum.
Okay, sounds good, very good. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? It's approved unanimously, thank you. And Councilmember Kane, traffic calming schedule for 132nd and High Drive area.
In your packet was the documentation showing the schedule for this ongoing discussion with the residents and the Public Works Committee. So I think it speaks for itself. It is a basic outline of how we're going to be moving forward, so everybody's on the same page. That's all I've got.
Are you looking for an approvement, or is this just an FYI?
I don't know. I didn't put this on here.
Mr.
So
Lay,
whatever
are you
is
looking
appropriate-
for
whatever is appropriate.
for a motion to accept this schedule?
That'd be great.
Okay. A motion to accept, Ms. Kane?
Please.
Second.
Okay, and a second from Ms. Phila. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's approved unanimously. Thank you. Ms. Stoddard, do you have a city administrator report? Other than I want to say thank you to you again, too, for stepping in and being the mediator.
Yeah, good job.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have anything further to report this evening. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. We have no staff reports, no old business. Go to new business. Scheduled governing body meeting on Monday, March 20th at 7 p.m. Could I have a motion, please?
Move for approval?
Motion from Mr. Rawlings. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Phila. If there's no discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's It's approved unanimously. Thank you. 15B is scheduled governing body work session on Monday, April 3rd, 2023, 6 p.m. Revenue projections and ARPA funding.
Move to approve.
Motion from Ms. Villa.
Second.
Second from Mr. Sipple. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's approved unanimously. Thank you. And finally, C, scheduled governing body meeting on Monday, April 3rd, 2023 at 7:30 p.m.
Move to approve.
Motion from Ms.
Second.
Villa. Second from Mr. Asseltine. If there's no discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Nay?
Oh,
Nay for the meeting?
that's the night.
So
At
long as the
7:30?
Jayhawks are not on. Thank you.
Oh, well, let's hope, or it'll be a short meeting. Yeah. And so, so it's approved,
Contingent upon.
approved with one dissension, and we are through. I am adjourning this meeting at 11 o'clock so that we don't have to extend for 30 minutes. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, for some reason, I can't find page 423, which I wanted to pull, which is the timeline.
The timeline is right, yeah. Well, David gives you one.
I know. I can look it up.
It's still flagged. It's still flagged.